maiden workshop has been put together or has been made possible by collaboration between Imani Center for Energy and FEAM, an Italian-based think tank. As the program goes on, we'll introduce FEAM properly.
Economic outlook, Ghana actually stands out next to Ethiopia.
There's a lot of overlap in our minds. But that is mainly because we haven't read the law. So I think the gas sector in general is something that requires a lot of attention.
I mean, comparing Nigerian gas price to Ghana price is a very big error.
My name is Barbara Ando, also affectionately known as Mamiesi, and I'm your MC for today. I work with the Center for the Study of Energy and Natural Resources at Imani. And this maiden workshop has been put together or has been made possible by collaboration between Imani Center for Energy and FEAM, an Italian-based think tank. As the program goes on, we'll introduce FEAM properly. Before we start anything, I'd like to take our minds back to a quote, a very popular quote from 2007. And it says, "With oil as a shot in the arm, we are going to fly." About 10 years plus of oil production later and over 200 million barrels of oil produced later, I think it's useful for us to reflect and go back and think on these things, whether indeed as a country we are flying. Along the line, we've had gas discoveries, and as a country, we consider that gas is very important to us because of its potential to supply our fuel needs for power generation and its potential also to boost our industry. But I believe there are critical questions that we need to ask today. In Ghana, for instance, what is our overall industrialization policy? How are we looking at gas? How are we mapping gas into our industrialization drive? What is our policy around utilization of gas, around the pricing of gas? And how is this going to engender the industrial growth that we seek to achieve? How is it going to boost economic growth and development that we all want to see? We would deliberate on these things as the program wears on. But before we go into that, I would like to introduce us to Imani properly and to the Center for Energy also properly. And I'll do that through a mixture of just talking and a presentation. So Imani is a multidisciplinary think tank, and basically we provide comprehensive policy analysis and we undertake strategic advocacy. This is to make sure we are providing policy solutions that ensure socio-economic development. Over the past 15 years, we can say that Imani has made tremendous impact because we believe that we have provided the kind of research, the kind of analysis that will keep public sector agencies on their toes, that will make sure that they are being accountable, and that will make sure we are ensuring value for money in all our projects and our contracts here in Ghana. And Imani also has a governing board, and our board constitutes Mr. Sampoku, Dr. Tony Otinjesi, as well as Captain Bodukumsen. We have our founder and CEO, Franklin Kujo, Mr. Kofi Bentel as our vice president, as well as Bright Simmons. And we also have an able-bodied staff and management. We are supported by fellows, and I would like to go through a list of our fellows. Dr. Theo Echampong, he is a senior economist, he's an energy economist and a senior fellow of Imani. We have Mr. Franklin Asari, he's a manager of Oracle East Africa. We have Ms. Amoa, Dr. Godfred Bokbin. And another interesting thing that most people don't know about Imani is that we have 4 centers. We have the Center for Economic and Political Affairs, the Center for Social Policy, the Center for Science, Technology and Innovation, as well as the Center for the Study of Energy and Natural Resources. So I'll take you through this brief presentation. I'll crave your indulgence to remain with me for a few minutes. So basically, the Center for Energy is a very strategic one, and we're looking at adopting novel approaches in addressing the problems facing the energy sector. And we realize that the problems in the energy sector are quite persistent, they are cyclical in nature, and they are recurring. And we also have transparency and accountability issues. We perceive that there's a lack of a follow-through approach, that's what we like to call it, in addressing the problems confronting the energy sector. And we believe that the implementation of any remedial measures or sustainability measures have to take a very different approach or a very different shape and focus. Our main approach as a center is hinged on these three things. First of all, a thorough diagnosis of the sector's problems, developing innovative ideas to solve the problems, and consistently tracking the application of these measures or innovative ideas. That's monitoring and evaluation. And the main focus areas for the Center for Energy is power sector, oil and gas, as well as renewable energy. We have our key objectives, which include providing evidence-backed remedies and innovative solutions, informing and influencing government energy policy, facilitating crucial and meaningful discourse, and empowering citizens especially to demand accountability from our energy sector agencies. So we would like to take you through some of our activities last year, 2018. The year began with a public lecture which gave an overview of the oil and gas sector, the challenges of the sector, and the way forward. The main outcome of this public lecture was that it helped us to see the critical areas that needed to be discussed, including particularly local content and gas sector issues. And it was actually out of this public lecture that we had our first engagement with FEAM and our partnership with FEAM. Then we moved on to have a local content event. We undertook an empirical study. We looked at the successes and challenges of local content, broad-based. And then we looked particularly at the oil and gas sector. And one of the outcomes of this particular study and event was that we noted that in the oil and gas sector in particular, a lack of local capacity to take advantage of local participation was our main issue concerning local content. Then we had another engagement, a joint seminar with OCPPC, a policy center in Morocco, and basically we looked at energy access in Ghana and in Africa, and we broached the topic of renewable energy as having the potential to increase energy access in Africa. And the main outcome was a realization that it was critical for us to have a regionally integrated approach in increasing energy access. Our key projects for 2019, and here's where I'd like us to, have a big focus. We are pushing hard on the gas sector issues, and we want to create awareness concerning gas. We want everyone to know exactly what is going on in our gas sector so that we are able to contribute, first of all, and also able to hold accountable those that are in charge. Our expected outcome of our first project, which is basically awareness creation and advocacy, is to have, first of all, an active uptake of policy recommendations that will come from all these stakeholder engagements. Secondly, we are looking at contract transparency in the upstream gas sector, and that's an empirical analysis of the contracting process for gas. And basically, we are looking at having improved standards for negotiating upstream gas contracts. And then we'll look once again at the role of digitalization in expanding energy access. In this age of technology, artificial intelligence, and whatnot, it's better we are inclined towards looking at things like digitalization and how they benefit energy in this part of the world. So we are looking at increased awareness as well as the adoption of digitalization in expanding energy access. It's also going to involve empirical research, public conferences, and seminars such as this. Then we'll look once again at local content. We'll look at our results from our last local content engagement. We'll have follow-on activities and make sure that all the recommendations, all the strategies, and the new ideas we are putting out are actually being implemented. The expected outcome is, of course, an improved implementation of local content policy. And as well, we'll continue with our stakeholder engagement. Our final project for the year is an energy sector performance index. Basically, we'll evaluate the performance of all energy sector regulatory agencies along the value chain in the delivery of their mandate. And the expected outcome is an improved performance of agencies and greater accountability. We'll develop an index and we'll have an assessment of the performance, and then we'll have an award ceremony. Our main goal for this year is to build partnerships for the next frontier of energy research. And we believe that as Imani, we have a very unique value proposition, which is policy analysis, which is the ability to engender and sustain dialogue, very necessary dialogue among government, citizens, and the private sector. We also are able to influence improvement in policy and the regulatory environment, which energy businesses can benefit from. And we'd like to call on all of us here. The Center for Energy requires your support. Every program that we see here requires some amount of support to be able to take off. And supporting the Center for Energy is supporting a great effort to improve energy policy and to guarantee the sustainability of the energy sector for us all. Thank you very much for listening to this brief presentation. I hope you've been enlightened about what Imani does and what our expectations are of you. If you would like to come to us, or if you'd like to know more, there's a slide with contact. You can contact Mr. Franklin Kujo, Dr. Theo Champon, Patrick Stevenson, or you can come to myself. And we ourselves will be coming to you directly as well to have discussions with you about how we can forge strategic partnerships. Thank you very much for listening to that. Now I can wear my moderator hat again. At this point, we'd like to invite Mr. Kofi Bento to deliver his welcome address. With a round of applause, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have you all here to discuss an extremely important issue, but which is not very exciting, especially in ordinary company, gas. And even with gas, we are actually discussing natural gas specifically. Even for those of us who spend time analyzing these things, sometimes the difference is lost on us. I was just having a discussion with one of my friends from NPA, and I can see my boss from NPA here. Welcome. And you know, the differences became clear again. So, first point, these gatherings are useful for dealing with some of these things which are important but otherwise could be obscure till they hit you. So I want you to take it very seriously and also make the contributions that you can make. Partly because apart from very few places, you don't find these discussions going on. But this is why it's important. Everybody in this country will be affected by what we are going to discuss today. Everybody. Your mother in the village, the president, everybody. The simple reason is because gas is crucial to this economy and will be more crucial as we go forward. Because we don't have a choice, that's one. And also because that is the plan. That's how it's been designed. However, we are not sure we are giving it the attention it requires. In 2009, Imani authored a document, and I always take the opportunity to highlight that document. It was published, I think, 2010. But the title is What Our Oil Cannot Do For Us. If you Google it, you should be able to find it. What Our Oil Cannot Do For Us. And I like to go back to that document because I remember around that time we had just discovered oil. And there were all kinds of things being said. In fact, very wild things about how it's going to transform this country. And as usual, we had the unenviable task of bursting everybody's bubble and saying that oil is not going to be that transformative. People were talking about how much work it's going to generate, and I remember making the point once that the FPSO would take only about 200 people. And for a number of years, those are the new jobs that will be added. Of the 200 people, 90% are highly skilled, highly technical. And I doubt if there will be any Ghanaians involved. People don't like it when you say so. I remember there was a newspaper banner headline in Graphic about the minister saying oil was going to give every Ghanaian 14 cedis or so, something like that. And we had the unenviable task of going up on air and saying that no, we're going to make just about 500 million in our oil every year, based on our calculations. Well, the first year we made just about that. Point is that we need to think through these things in order not to be all over the place when it comes to our petrol industry, our hydrocarbon industry generally, because it has very serious consequences for us. I'm just going to read a few, just one extract from that publication. And that section said, gas is our great hope. Gas, our great hope. We said we must not allow oil to remove our focus from gas, which in our view is our great energy hope as a country. Gas is efficient and is cheap. And when I say gas, I mean natural gas, not LPG. But it is difficult and dangerous to transport, to export, and to sell, which means we are better off using our natural gas close to source and here at home. Fortunately, gas can do everything oil can do. We should therefore export almost all of our oil and use all of our gas. Now, this is the plan anyway. That is to use the gas to generate energy and hopefully export it. But there needs to be better clarity on our gas strategy, especially regulation and pricing. We still don't have good enough clarity on our gas strategy, especially regulation and pricing. My job here is to just, put things in context. Better people will come and give you more detail on it. But for me, this is where I want to invite you to make your submissions and contributions on this issue, because honestly, we are failing in that regard. And that failure is crucial because gas is going to power all our electricity. That's how it will affect your mother in the village. Now, if we don't get the pricing of gas right, we will make a mess of that sector. Natural gas regulation today is not coherent. We are not sure what we want to do with it, and there are turf wars already going on. We need to get a handle on that very quickly. So it's not a good thing that our gas policy is all over the place. I hope from today we will set the tone to force our leaders to articulate something coherent so we know we are on a certain path that will lead us to a certain clear position. Already, even though we are not clear what we want to do with regulation and pricing and all those things, we are dealing in serious quantities of gas. Indeed, we are getting the gas out, and some of it is being rejected. Some of it is coming onshore. We are not very coherent, and I keep using the word because something is being done. But whether that is out of a plan that is being executed or we are doing things as we go along, we are not very sure. And that coherence must be there for everybody to see. So we need to get that right. Now, if we don't get that right, our power sector will suffer. And if our power sector suffers, everything will suffer. Pricing, which is part of what we're going to discuss today, is at the heart of getting things right. We tend to treat government property as if it does not need to be economically priced. And that's a mistake. Because if we do that, we are going to make a total mess of a potentially great sector. Gas can power this whole economy. From buses to trains to homes, gas can be the base of our energy as an economy. But if we get the pricing wrong, we will end up turning a potentially great asset into a huge, confused liability, just based on pricing. As we speak, there are times when our own gas costs more than imported gas. As we speak today, gas that belongs to us, that is associated, comes out, and we have to deal with it. By the time we finish dealing with it and we're trying to sell it to the PPAs, it costs more than if somebody imported gas and landed it here. That's the problem coming up. So we need to make sure this asset does not become a liability. We need to develop a clear philosophy for what we will do with our gas. We have made a proposal, and the proposal is that we should use all our gas, convert this economy into a gas-powered economy, at home, in industries, on the streets, buses, and everybody. That's our philosophy. Our philosophy should be sell all the oil and let's use the gas. And it is doable. If we can think ahead, have a 5-year, a 10-year plan, we can do this. And if we do that, it will become the powering agent for this economy. Our hope is that we will start and get this coherence together. Our job as a think tank is to raise these issues and to urge our leaders to spend some time on these issues. Kicking the can down the line, doing things as they come is not the best. And in this particular issue, if we don't get it right, there will be a lot to pay. I hope this forum will start the discussion that will lead to an ultimate solution. You are very welcome, and I hope you enjoy today. Thank you.
I think I have a very personal interest, especially in channeling gas towards our power generation. As Mr. Bento said, we should use all our gas within the country rather than thinking of exports or anything. But I'm wondering, when it comes to the issue of debt, when it comes to the issue of the efficiency of our power sector, are we able to indeed pay for our own gas? I'd like that to be on our minds. As I call Mr. Filippo Tessari from FEAM to make his opening remarks. Mr. Tessari is the delegate for the operative coordination of research activities. He collaborates with the project office and communication area of FEAM for the coordination of institutional activities. He manages the operations for E&I Award project and is responsible for FEAM's consultancy activities in Africa. In short, Mr. Filippo is a very big man. Shall we, with a round of applause, welcome him?
And I'm just a man working like all of us, and I don't want to waste the time this morning because first of all we got in the point, and we have a lot of things to say, and we hope we have a lot of time for discussion. That's the point for this morning. Just let me briefly say what is FEAM and why we are here, because I'm sure you don't know us. FEAM is a research center, a think tank. We have been founded 30 years ago in 1989, and our mission since the first day was to deliver research of frontiers, trying to find disruptive ideas, try to push on policymakers, on scientific community, on what is the new frontiers of research and science. When we have been founded, no one was speaking about climate change. So we started on climate change. It was not in the agenda of any people, any researcher, any policymaker. So we started to say there is something linked with human activity and climate change. We have to define it, we have to model it, we have to quantify it. And we started. And in 10 years we developed very strong theoretical models, econometrical models to quantify climate change adaptation, climate change mitigation, and then we went to IPCC and we drafted the report at the UN first conference. So from there, the story of climate change started, and we were very proud of it. In 30 years, we developed many different research streams, and we got a very strong reputation in scientific community. Then what happened? A few years ago, we started to say, okay, climate change is not a new thing. Everyone knows about it. Everyone is on everyone's agenda. So we have to go beyond this. We have to rethink our institution. We have to have again an impact. The problem is not to publish on very high-level scientific paper, but is to have outcomes, not outputs. So we redefined everything in FEAM. And we understood that the point now in the society, globally speaking, is to decarbonize energy system, to decarbonize urbanization. to go to the Agenda 2030 or Africa 2063 agenda, we have to change our mindset, we have to send our production, we have to change everything, because the world needs this change. So we did an incredible effort at FIM. We changed all the research programs, and one of the reasons why now we are here is that one of the most important topics in our research and in our effort is Africa. Because we understood finally that the African continent is the future of Europe, is the future of global governance. We need new paradigms to understand what is moving on. And we also have to give a different perspective in Italy and in Europe about African continent. What happens? Happens that we started to work with scientific stakeholders in Africa, especially in sub-Saharan countries. We started to do collaborative research. We started to change the paradigm of, we can call, the old vision was the capacity building. So the old vision was we have very sophisticated tools. We know the things, we have good universities, so we just go in Africa with, like magician, with our tools. We work for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 months, we go back and everything is done. This didn't work, you know better than me. So we changed the paradigm. Now we want to address a different way to collaborate. We think that is a peer collaboration. So we have maybe some sophisticated tools, but you have the vision of what's going on in your country, in your town. You are boots on the ground, you know the problems. You maybe know the solution, so we have to have a peer collaboration. And then we started this new vision with this program that is called Africa RAP, where RAP it's not that RAP, but it's Research Empowerment and Partnership. So maybe someone of you were present in March 2018. We started at University of Ghana with a scientific workshop to collaborate with our stakeholders. We just put the basis, the fundamental for the next year's collaboration. Then on the way we found Imani, and we found that Imani is very close to us, it's very close to our vision, because it's not just research for research, but it's research for impact in real world. So we started a few months ago, and thank you also to Franklin and Theo and all the Imani staff for the great work we did in the past months. On 25th December included, because I remember the last emails, it was Christmas, and it was, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, but remember this, do that, so we never stop. And thank you to all of you for coming and to see what's the result of this first step. It's just the first step. I think the second step will be the discussion we'll have this morning, but we have further projects we want to develop. We want to develop with the Ghanaian institution, governmental institution, scientific institution. We really believe we can work together for a better future, for a common future, because the future of Ghana is the future of Africa. The future of Africa is the future of Europe and of all of us. So thank you very much, and have a good, fruitful morning. Thanks.
Presence of a few people in our midst. First of all, we'd like to acknowledge the presence of Honorable Hassan Tampuli, the Chief Executive Officer for the National Petroleum Authority. Shall we give him a round of applause, please? Also, we have representatives from PIAC, from Cosmos Energy, from VRA, from the Ministry of Justice, from Ghana Gas, from ENI, from Petroleum Commission, from the WAPCO, from GridCo, from GNPC, from ASEP, from the Ministry of Energy, from UNICEF, from Parliament, and then from the Ministry of Trade and Industry. As time goes on, we will mention names and do the due acknowledgement. But before we go into that, we would like to invite Dr. Theo Echiampong and Dr. Manfred Hafner to deliver the most important presentation for today. A presentation on a research project that has been conducted on gas price formation in Ghana. Dr. Teo is a senior fellow with Imani, and he's an energy economist. And I believe that Dr. Manfred is a senior fellow with FEAM, and they'll give the due introduction. Shall we give them a round of applause, please?
On the importance of the gas price formation issues for the development of Ghana. This is a research which has been performed jointly by FEAM, by Theo Achampong and myself. Theo,
all right, so I just quickly introduce myself. So as Professor Manfred was saying, this work here is a joint collaborative work between FEAM and Imani, and we just wanted to look at one of the aspects of the gas industry in Ghana, particularly the issue of gas pricing. But what does that really mean in terms of the country's broad-based industrial development agenda, and what does that also mean for inclusive growth? So it's not just gas pricing or price for its own sake, but it's got to be connected to something at the end of the day. And in the next couple of slides, we just walk through some of the findings from the work. So today, just in terms of the broad outline, and both of us will be co-presenting in between, is just basically to go through the resources that we've got, the policy environment currently, and then apply some sort of analytical framework to determine what the price makeup or composition is. I would speak broadly a little bit on the whole political economy around natural gas pricing in Ghana, show you some of the results that we got using the pricing framework or approach, and then talk more broadly about some of the levies and charges, the recurrent debt or non-payment issues in the sector, what that means for the long-term viability of the gas industry in Ghana, and then just summarize with a few policy recommendations and conclusions. Can you all hear us from the back, please? All good? Brilliant. So, you keep asking yourself, why is this important, in the first place? We know for certain that Ghana has come off a short period where there has been sluggish growth. In the last, the period between 2012 to 2016, mid-2017, I need not remind us all, but we had persistent, blackouts, or people would say, doomsday, right? Yes, or, for those of us who are not from Ghana, it's on and off, if I translate it right. So we had doomsday over the period from 2016 to early 2017, and that's part because of the lack of power in the sector, and that actually drove had a significant impact on economic growth in the country. So you can see on my bottom left-hand chart here the growth trajectory between the period in question. However, when you look at the next medium-term developmental prospect of the country, we see the country's economic growth picking up over the next medium term. So by that I mean the next 3 to 5 years. And in the latest IMF economic outlook, Ghana actually stands out next to Ethiopia and then later Rwanda there as one of the few countries in the sub-Saharan Africa that is going to be experiencing in excess of 7%, a real GDP growth year on year from 2019, onwards. And to drive this growth, you need power, you need energy, you need, energy to catalyze that growth. And it's been estimated that there's about 10% year-on-year demand, particularly for power, and I mean electricity in the sector. And it's quite important then to realize that a lot of this growth would be driven by energy, but we know also as well that we cannot entirely rely on the hydro dams that we have in the country. So we've had years of persistent declining rainfall into the country's dams, and as a result, thermal power has become more or less the base for electricity in the country. So currently, when you look at the statistics or the data produced by the Energy Commission in their 2018 outlook report, almost about 60% of the total generation capacity, total generation output, not capacity, in the country is coming from thermal power. And for thermal power, there's also the need, or we understand that this will have to be fueled by natural gas. And so the question of natural gas, how you price it, how it enters into the whole energy mix, and ultimately how that translates into tariffs for industry, for commercial users, and for residential users becomes quite critical in the country's overall broad-based development approach. But we know also as well that luckily Ghana has some good domestic gas resources and reserves, which can actually augment or meet the country's power requirements in the medium term. But to bring these gas reserves and resources to market, the environment needs to be right, both in terms of the regulatory, but particularly the how you price that gas. So the resources in the currently, from a number of estimates, we're looking at a base case of just around 2.4, 2.5 trillion cubic feet of gas. What that translates roughly in total is that we can still get just between 350 to 400 million standard cubic feet of gas a day to feed the country's power plants and then the industrialization development. That would predominantly come from Jubilee, from TEN, from the Sankofa or the offshore Cape 3 Points development, and then other fields when they come on, like the ACA development. So the base case gas resource or estimates in the country would come from these predominantly 4 or 5 fields. And what that also looks like, when you roll it out on a long-term scenario, is that we are going to have significantly quite a number of the domestic gas resources and reserves being utilized, to drive the country's, developmental agenda forward. The West African gas pipeline still features, but as you can see, historically it's been unreliable. And in the absence of more supply flows coming in, we do not think that that would play a significant role in the country's, domestic gas agenda, going forward. But you also may have to then supplement, from the late 2020s onwards with additional LNG, imports. That is in the absence of making other discoveries or declining or depleting the current reserves that that we have. But the point here to note is that the discovery of gas has fundamentally changed Ghana's fuel supply dynamics, and there would be enough domestic gas to meet the power demands, in the country and the economy. The key question then becomes, how do you price this gas? And how does that then become competitive for industry and ultimately create jobs and sustainability? I just put this little one here again to show that in the quest to bring these domestic gas resources online, a number of activities have taken place, in Ghana's offshore basins. And most of the gas fields and the discoveries are in the Western Basin. In 10 years ago, there was very little infrastructure in this place to evacuate the gas. But then Jubilee came on. We've got a pipeline that brings the gas to Atuabo, and then currently we've got the ENI development as well that brings gas to the offshore receiving facility, I think at Sanzule. Please correct me if I get the name wrong. At Sanzule. But there has been a renewed focus, in revamping the country's exploration activities. And that's been driven in part by the fact that, yes, we know that the maritime border with Côte d'Ivoire on the western front has been delimited now. And we've seen the launch of the country's first competitive offshore oil and gas licensing around sometime October next year. And the award is expected to be made by the end, I believe, the last quarter of this year. This would all go, if we get more resources through the provision of different, fiscal, non-fiscal incentives to ensure that this domestic gas resources that we have, we can actually increase the size of the resources and the reserves and use that, to feed the demand for power. How does the industry itself, look like, or how is this organized? I actually stole this slide from Ghana National Gas. I think it's quite a good one in explaining how the architecture of the industry is set up. So at the very end, which is the upstream side, yes, you have the domestic gas resources. We've got some bit of import from the West African gas pipeline and LNG. It goes through a series of pipelines. You process it, you transmit it, and then ultimately it goes to the demand centers, in the country. And every stage of, this activity layout here comes with a cost component. And in the next few slides, we actually would see how you can, work out the price from, the gas itself at the wellhead, ultimately to the final, user or the final consumer. And secondly, from the supply end to the distribution end, you also kind of look out spatially. This is how the infrastructure plan, is being proposed to look like. So a lot of the gas infrastructure in terms of the processing, yes, we know, and is located in the Western Enclave, and there are proposals to build a pipeline that takes some of the gas up north into Kumasi and other places, and then going eastwards to the industrial or the demand center in Takoradi. There's a pipeline that links, the West African gas pipeline that links Tema to Takoradi, but I know there are proposals or discussions in place, to do the reverse flow. But in addition to that, also negotiate what the tariff, for transmitting or pushing gas from Takoradi to Tema would be like. So the main facilities are in the west. We've got a major demand center in the east, in Accra and Tema. And the question is, how do you bring gas from the west to the facilities in Tema and then further in Kumasi? And how does that ultimately translate into the price that you pay for gas? So at this point, having kind of set the framework, I will just stop briefly and then invite Manfred to now walk us through what the underpinnings when it comes to pricing are, and then I'll come back later.
Thank you, Theo. So the way we have decided to divide up the presentation is Theo presenting the Ghanaian local content, and I'm trying to give you a more international perspective as well. Hello? I have to find the right angle here. So I said Theo gives the more local Ghanaian perspective, and I try to contribute with a more international perspective as well. So Theo has presented us the opportunities and challenges of natural gas in Ghana and the infrastructure issues. And obviously, as it has been said, natural gas can be and should be and must be a tremendous, a very important contributor to socio-economic development in Ghana. In order to do so, you need to have a proper institutional setting, regulatory setting, pricing setting. And let's look at the pricing issues. There is no one pricing issue in the world. There are many pricing mechanisms, which I'm going to present to you right now. So in the world, depending on the situation, there are different ways of setting prices. Let me just go through a few of them, and then let's discuss which one are more appropriate or less appropriate. So we have oil price escalation. We also call it oil price indexation. We use it in many countries. We use it when we are not comfortable with the second one, which is called gas-on-gas competition. Gas-on-gas competition means the market forms the prices. The market forms the prices. That's already happening in the US for several decades, in the UK, and progressively in Europe. It works when you have a market, when you have sufficient suppliers and consumers, when you have just one supplier, when you have a monopoly or oligopoly of suppliers. You do not have a real market, and therefore it's difficult to have, you have a single player who can squeeze the market. So the idea is to have this oil price indexation or escalation, which means you take a proxy price, oil price, for it. And this is what we have had in Europe in the past, up to recently. Right now we have a hybrid system between the first and the second one. This is what we have in Asia and in some other countries. Gas-on-gas competition, it means gas-to-gas market. You need to have a lot of producers, a lot of consumers, you have a real market. In the US, we call it Henry Hub. In the UK, national balancing point. In Europe, we have several ones, the most important of which is the Dutch one, TIF. Then we have this bilateral monopolies. When you have between two countries, or one country and big consumers, big industries, you negotiate bilaterally. Thank you. So you have a direct negotiation between two governments, or a government, or a governmental entity, and big consumers. And then we have what we call netback from final product or from final energy. This is what you would normally, you want to develop natural gas for fertilizers, for ammonia, for chemical industry. You want the plant to be able to compete on international markets. The market price of this commodity is fluctuating, so you may want to take on the risk, the price risk. And but you have the volume assured, because you always guarantee the plant to produce. Or we have opportunity cost-based approach, which comes back to the price indexation approach. In other words, you look at what your consumers would have to, what type of fuel or energy your customers would use. You look at the price of this, which we call opportunity cost, and then this is the maximum price you can charge. And then you have to give a discount, because you need to convince them to switch over to your gas in order to use your gas. And then we have a lot of different types of regulatory regimes. In the world, very often we hear that it's either oil price indexation or competition, gas-to-gas competition. In reality, 2/3 of the world are still based on regulation. And this is mainly in the developing world. And there are different types of regulation. There's cost of service, which means cost plus. You add all your costs, you add a profit, and then you try to sell it at that price. The good thing is that you are sure that nobody is making losses. The bad thing is you may outprice your product. There might not be a market for that. And the other thing is you need a regulator or a ministry who sets these prices, and there is an asymmetry of information. The industry knows what's going on, but they don't. And the players may be able to overblow sometimes some cost in transmission, in distribution, and so on. You may have, for political reasons, you may want to keep the price as low as possible, and very often below cost, which may have a logic, which may have a social logic, but in reality is backblowing very quickly, because if people who invest cannot recover their costs, they have a problem, they will not invest, they are out of business. First thing. Second thing, we have shown it, there is a lot of evidence in the world, the literature, by the World Bank, by many researchers, that subsidies in the sense of selling below cost is not helping the poor, is always helping the well-off. It's, if you want to have subsidies, use targeted subsidies for the poor. Universal subsidies are mainly for the rich, for the well-off, and they destroy eventually the economy. It's blowing back into your economy, because you need to find the money somewhere in the economy to make sure that you pay the difference of the cost. So here we can see all this what we call internal factors, which are cost plus, all the cost elements you can add. And then you have the external factors, which is the price of the competitive fuels. Now ideally, and this is the case in this country, ideally the competitive fuels, which is fuel oil products, they're always more expensive than the addition of all the individual costs of your gas. So when you are in this situation, if you are not in this situation, if adding up all your costs, you are below the cost of opportunity cost of your competitive fuels, you're out of business, you shouldn't go ahead. But in this country, we are lucky, and in many other countries, natural gas has a market. Now it's a question on how do we share the rent between the opportunity cost, what the consumer is willing to pay ideally, and what all the costs build up amount to. And we will come back to that later on. We can also see that worldwide there are very different prices for natural gas. We can see here on the top, this one here are European prices or Asian Pacific prices. They are partly or heavily oil price index. So when the oil price is high, the prices will be high. When the oil price is low, the gas price will be low. We have right here US or North American prices, which is gas-to-gas competition. In the US, you know, 2008, 2009, we had a shale gas revolution, a lot of natural gas coming into the market, domestic natural gas. It couldn't be exported, so there was an oversupply of natural gas. The prices collapsed. So this you can see here, very low prices. And then we have regulated prices, which are fixed, which are regulated, which are not dependent on any market dynamics. We can see here different parts of the world, different pricing regimes, all these different pricing regimes, which I have explained earlier on, they are here. So if we just take, for instance, Asia, it's mainly oil-priced indexation. If we take North America, it's fully gas-to-gas competition. If we take Africa, we see we have a very diversity of approaches. We can see them here again. 56% are regulation below cost. It's not the case of Ghana, but it's the case of many countries in Africa, which is really what you should not aim for. In Ghana, we have a mixture, as we understand, between bilateral monopoly and regulation cost of service. And we will come back to this. And now I give the floor back to my friend Theo, and then I will come back to some very final conclusions.
Okay, thank you, Manfred.
So yes, he's talked us about the different approaches, and in Ghana we have a mixture between the cost of service regulation and the bilateral monopoly. So we took this framework in mind, and then we asked ourselves that framework together with the cost build-up, model architecture in mind, and then asked ourselves just one simple question: how does this look like for the different gases, that we've got in the country? So by that I mean the domestic gas resources that we've got, 10, Sankofa, Jubilee, and then how does that also look like when you consider imports from the West African gas pipeline? Just to understand what the constituent components are, but also the relation between what the market opportunity cost of that is relative to what the actual cost build-up would be. So on this chart here, you can actually see the cost categorization or the cost makeup of the different gas, domestic and imported gas in the country. And the constituent makeup would be, at the very bottom you would have the commodity charge, or the wellhead purchase price of the gas. And then there are a couple of regulatory levies that are added on top of that. So and charges. So but I mean the gathering charge, which is your the light gray color in there. There's a processing charge, there's a transportation charge, a couple of regulatory levies, and then minor shipping and aggregation levies in total. And the data for this actually comes from the Energy Commission and then the PURC itself, and then of course the analysis is from our thinking of the issues in terms of what the cost component is. But you can see clearly from here that in terms of the cost build up, when you add it all together, the associated gas that we've got in the country, Jubilee 10, are relatively the lowest that we can get in the country, and it's associated. So in fact, it's free, and for Jubilee, I believe the first 200 billion cubic feet is actually free gas that comes into the country. And then when you look at the other non-associated gas and the imports, so OCTP and then the West African, import from the West African gas pipeline, because for OCTP, it's a non-associated gas development, and you have to, look at it on that basis and on that integrated manner. The actual cost, is slightly more higher than, the associated gas. And similarly for West African gas pipeline coming in, you are pricing it on the basis of gas coming in from Nigeria, 700 kilometers into Ghana. But the other point to really note here is that when you work out the weighted average cost, of all these gas streams in the country, you're looking at about $6.5 for every million British thermal units, BTU. And then when you look at how much is actually being sold for, that is translating roughly to about $8.5 for every million BTU. So OCTP, Sankofa, and the West African gas pipeline gas are pretty much being sold at a cost basis without any markup on it. But then when we look at the Jubilee and then 10, you can clearly see, and I'll show you in another slide, that there's quite a significant markup between the cost basis, or the cost plus basis, when you add all the tariffs and the sales price of the gas. And this has quite a number of implications, which I will talk about in the next few slides. But one of which really is, how that ultimately impacts the tariffs that we pay, for electricity. So at the sales bit, there's a universal price that is set by the PRC, but the actual cost of the different gas streams in the country, particularly the associated gas, is significantly much lower than how much the gas is being sold for, and the difference between the economic cost of the gas and the sales price is the rents that are being accrued. And I want to take you one step back because there's been questions around the Sankofa gas, and those of us who are working in this industry, when you go online, you do a bit of search, there's been a lot of discussion and hue and cry about, the Sankofa gas being more expensive, and I just made a point that it's part non-associated gas, which reflects in the cost, in the relatively, higher cost of that vis-a-vis Jubilee. But then when you actually look at the sales of that, it's competitive to gas coming in from the West African gas pipeline. But let's look at that in a little bit more detail, to understand why we have, that cost structure or cost makeup. So on this other slide here, on the chart on your left, you can see, and this is based on a World Bank study on the original $9.8 for every million standard cubic feet, million British thermal units, sorry, I'm confusing you. And on the basis of the original price, and I must say that the price has now been renegotiated from 9.8 to 7.89. But on the basis of that original price, when you actually work it out, you will see that a significant component of that price is actually coming by way of GMPC's equity entitlement, and then other income tax and royalties that are added onto the cost. And when we strip those ones out from this waterfall chart, so if you strip out the orange bit in there, you actually arrive at a net kind of invoice price for the gas of around $7, for every million British thermal unit. And then further, if you work it through the life cycle of the field on an integrated basis, and you take out, the additional royalties and then the income tax, the net gas price, which is the price that the investors in the field minus GMPC, should or would be, paying at, will translate roughly to $4.855 for every million British, thermal unit. And that is what partly explains what you see in the previous chart as the cost or the price build-up of, the Sankofa gas. But as I noted earlier, it's actually on a similar basis in terms of the sales to West African gas, pipeline. However, for Jubilee 10 and both associated, non-associated, there's a significant, margin of rent that is being accrued, to the state. And we were asking ourselves the question, what would it actually mean if, for example, the margins and the rents were brought down by, say, 20%, and then you had that reduction being $1.5 to $2, right, every million BTU. And then you plug that into the electricity tariffs. How does that mean, or what would the impact of that be for the average tariff that consumers pay and the tariff that, industry also pays? And you'll see that in the next few slides. So I want to show you again another rendition of the first challenge. So you can see clearly that for Jubilee 10, because they are associated and part non-associated, although the sales price is fixed, the cost price is much, much lower. So the net, the gross sales margins on these different streams For Jubilee, it's roughly just about 3.8, dollars. And then for 10, for the different associated and unassociated, it's between 3.7 and 2.4. But OCTP and West African gas pipeline, there's barely any margin on them because they are being sold at a cost, plus basis. And we ask ourselves, can something be done about this in a way that, would ultimately mean slightly, lower tariffs for industry and then for consumers. So the work indicates that on average, yes, we have a delivered cost of gas of 6.55, and then it's being sold at 8.55, and you have an average gas rent or margins of about in excess of $2 for every million British, thermal units, and it's as though Jubilee and 10, which are only 60 kilometers away offshore, is being priced on the same parity basis as gas coming in from 700 kilometers away from Nigeria. And we're just asking ourselves again questions: why is this, or should this be the case? Why should there be this sort of huge, differential in the margins, of these different gas streams and components? You can look at it again you can look at it in another slightly different context or format in this chart here. So in 2017, or in the period up to 2017, a lot of the pricing approach when it comes to not the commodity price, the other constituents, your processing, transportation, gathering charges, was fairly arbitrary in that sense of the word. So there was an average markup on the cost of gas of about $5 for every million British thermal MMBTU. However, in 2018, as part of the institutional changes and alignment, we note that PURC actually stepped in to try and curb this sort of huge difference between the actual cost of the gas and how much is being sold for. So as we speak, from the data that we gathered, it's come down from 5.28 to about $3 in terms of the markup. However, we still don't know what actually, or the rationale that went into determining what these constituent cost components are, and that we believe is a public policy question that needs to be further addressed. And we hope when we open up the floor for discussion, we'll get contributions from the different institutional players here. So something has been or is being done in terms of addressing the markup pricing components. But we also note that at the PRC level itself, there's also a levy that they charge as regulatory levy. It's not much, and before it was 0.66, it's now 40 cents. However, we realize that the same levy that is being charged by the West African Gas Processing Authority, WACPA actually charges, 0.06, whereas, PURC is charging, 0.4 as regulatory, levy, and we're not too sure the rationale behind that. So if WACPA gas coming 700 kilometers away to Ghana, attracts a levy of 0.06, for the regulator, why is, PRC slapping an additional, 40 cents on the regulatory, as regulatory levy? Again, in the wider scheme of things, it's not really much, but as they say, little is much. It all adds up. So, it'll be interesting to get, a few additional answers on the rationale behind the levies and the rationale behind the different, component costs, and why we are seeing this big, difference in the sales margins. I want to touch on, just away from that, I just want to touch on one other point on the non-payment, issues in in the sector. And oh, by the way, just a little point on this. If we look at the Ghana, the updated gas master plan, there are two. The policy recognizes two approaches, as in there's what the government calls the strategic industrial sector, which they believe can actually benefit from the price of gas being on a cost plus basis. So basically the investors can still recoup their investment, but you're not going to put a huge margin, on that. However, in the master plan, it's only the fertilizer industry or fertilizer sector that actually has been categorized as strategic. But we're asking ourselves the question, why fertilizer? When the most obvious need is actually power. And in Nigeria, when you look at the Nigerian gas master plan, they actually have a three-tier approach. So there's the strategic industrial sector, and they have the power sector being a huge component of that industrial sector. And then they talk about other industrial sectors like methanol, ammonia, which should be priced on the basis of the netback. So cost plus whatever the willingness to pay for that gas is. But in the Ghana case, yes, we have strategic only being fertilizer, and then all other industries, including power, have to pay gas on a cost plus with the extra margin on top. And we think perhaps there may be a bit of a need for a rethink around that. More so because over 85 to 90% of the domestic gas resources that we have in this country would be over the next 5 to 10 years would actually be used for power production and not necessarily going into some of the other industrial sectors. So let me now touch on the non-payment issues, and then we'll summarize our thoughts together and then get some contributions from the floor. So on one breath, you have the IPPs, you have the EMP companies which produce the gas. And then in 2014, there was a realignment of the mandate where GMPC now is the national gas aggregator. So GMPC has a mandate to buy gas from all the different producers, to invest in gas infrastructure, and then now supply the gas to other users. And I think as part of their alignment, we had Ghana Gas being, its shares being transferred to GMPC. I'm still not too sure what the status of that is, so perhaps anybody from any of these agencies can make a comment on that. But the point here is that the gas is bought by GMPC or Ghana Gas. It's sold to VRA and then the IPPs to be used for power generation, and then subsequently they would then sell the power to ECG. And we know that the Achilles heel in all of this is actually at the very downstream end from ECG, where there are significant non-payment issues as a result of under recovery of tariffs and some technical and commercial losses in there. For some of the projects like OCTP, yes, they have some partial risk guarantees in place. So there's a sovereign guarantee by the government, and then there's the World Bank MEGA guarantee, and then there's a dedicated account that's been ring-fenced that all the sales from the gas actually are used to go into. But even with this arrangement in place, if the fundamental issue of the creditworthiness of the energy sector, bodies, particularly, yes, ECG and then to an extent VRA, are not addressed, then you have this domino effect, happening within the industry. And this comes off the back of the fact that there has been an attempt to improve the liquidity in the sector by the floating of the 2.5 billion ESLA, bond. And that part of that is meant to be used to service some of these legacy debts in the SOEs. However, we still note that even with that being floated, arrears are still being accrued in the value chain. So it might be have a bit of a rethink, around the non-payment, the significant non-payment, and the structural, issues which hinders, companies from being able to recoup the cost of the gas supplied. And it's even more worrying in the sense that GMPC, now being the aggregator, would have different, gas sales agreement in place. And sometimes we may have up to 90% take or pay on some of these contracts. So, if that is not addressed, then somebody has to pay for the gas one way or the other to allow the, the investors to recoup their monies that they have put into these fields. So I'll just summarize broadly some of the points, and then Manfred will come and also Professor Manfred will touch on some of it. We know that Ghana has enough gas resources to meet the domestic market, particularly for power. But then there are a couple of challenges, or a couple of trade-offs that need to be made. One, how do you provide the investments or the incentives for the E&P companies? How do you capture gas rents, in a way that you maximize royalties and taxes? How do you ensure regular supply? And ultimately, how does that actually translate into reduction, of the tariffs electricity tariffs that consumers, pay in the power sector? And the work that we did sought to provide this sort of assessment on the gas price, formation process in Ghana. And the findings, I shared earlier indicate that on average, there are significant rents in excess of $2 for every million BTU that is being accrued with the domestic, gas resources. And there are questions around that, and if, that could actually come down in a way that the tariffs also, go down. And we also understand from theory and from literature that, many aspects of the gas industry, inherently, they are monopolistic in nature. So you would need some sort of, domestic gas market price regulation with a view of accruing, rent. However, this may not be optimal and actually may be counter, intuitive in terms of hindering the developmental objectives, of the country. So the main take-home point here in terms of policy recommendation is that we believe that there's a need for detailed rules on the price determination policy and approach, and that needs to be published by the industry regulator, and that should actually provide a number of things. One, a clear economic basis for the price, and what makes and that's beside what constitute the commodity charges. So that, the gathering, the processing, the transportation, on all the other regulatory levies that are being imposed. What is the rationale and the basis, for that? And we believe that providing such information actually not only enlightens and informs, the different players, but also could potentially reduce any tariff, conflict that may arise, and that would improve overall consumer, welfare. And when you look at gas prices, wholesale gas prices in other African markets, let's not go too far. In other African markets, for power generation is actually between $3 and $6 for every million BTU. And that has significant, multiplier effects on the economy and then on job creation. So I think I've spoken enough. I will pause briefly and then also ask Professor Manfred to add a few concluding thoughts.
Thank you, Theo. So I just have a few main comments to add. First, the difference between oil economics and natural gas economics, that oil economics is an economics about rent sharing. Low cost, high prices, huge rents to be shared. Natural gas is completely different. natural gas, high cost, and it's mainly economics of cost maintenance. A country which has both oil and gas should always try to maximize domestic use of natural gas in order to export as much oil as possible. Why? Because transportation costs are lower when the gas is used domestically. Gas can and should be and must be and can be a strong driver for socio-economic development of the country. In order to do so, we need to give the right incentives to the investors. They need to be able to recover the costs they have incurred, and we need to give them the incentives to explore in order to find and to put on stream new natural gas. And also non-associated natural gas, which is more expensive. Associated natural gas, you recover a lot of costs with oil. Non-associated natural gas, of course we would all like to have a lot of oil and gas associated to it, but we also need gas, and we need to encourage that, and that is more expensive, and we need to see how to manage that. The government is entitled to get part of this total rent. It's very clear. We produce oil, we produce gas. This is no longer there for future generations. It belongs to the nation. They should get a fair share of the rent. But the consumers, they are also entitled to have a part of their rent. In other words, the governmental rent should not be too high. Otherwise, we outprice the commodity. Otherwise, we do not give the incentive. We do not transfer the rent to the consumers. And it is the consumers, by having a lower price, by therefore having a share of the rent indirectly, that they will consume more, industry will develop, electrification will go on, power generation will be more developed, and socioeconomic development will happen. So Ghana, as we see it, should strongly encourage the use of its own domestic gas resources. This also means to develop more domestic gas resources. This means to put these gas resources, domestic gas resources, at the service of its own population, of its own economy. By the way, Ghana is not getting huge royalties when Ghana imports natural gas. Ghana gets royalties when it produces natural gas domestically. Therefore, let's encourage the exploration, extraction, the use of domestic natural gas with intelligence incentives, not overpricing, not overcharging the gas with too heavy levies. We saw in the presentation by Theo, there are upstream levies, upstream royalties. They represent about 50% on the cost, or 1/3 of the total cost. And in addition, there are midstream and downstream levies, the one which Theo tackled, and they amount to $2 per million BTU. It's a lot of money. If this could be transferred, this downstream, additional royalties, levies, in addition to the cost, part of this could be transferred to the consumers by having lower prices. Consumers, the price of electricity will be lower, socio-economic development will take off, people will be convinced and will be encouraged to move back from using their own diesel generators to use again electricity from the network. Thank you very much.
If you're like me, you have 1,001 questions that you'd like to ask. And I'd like to remind us of the context and the expected outcomes of this workshop once again is to facilitate an understanding of the gas sector, is to make sure that we are understanding the policies around gas, the pricing issues, and basically to get a set of recommendations or strong policy actions that we wish to take from here. So there will be opportunities right after this for your questions and your reactions. But before we do that, I'd like to once again acknowledge some people in our midst. From the Energy Commission, we have Dr. Aka, we have Dennis Najar, Doris Agbevivi, Joseph Isando. From the Ministry of Justice, Kwale Darko. From Ghana Gas, we have Mr. George J. Sylvester Kujo. From Petroleum Commission, we have David Owusu. From the NPA, apart from Honorable Hassan Tampuli, we have Abbas Tasuntu. Forgive me if I don't pronounce it right. We have Manakwe, we have Alpha Welbeck, we have Nane Cha Adia. From the Ministry of Energy, we have Hassan Nawab and Horace Hato. From Parliament, we have Dala Soa. From the Ministry of Trade and Industry, we have Fritz Gokel. And from ECG, we have Peter Flesher, Kwame Ajaman Budu, Eko Apia Kuku. So we acknowledge you all, and as time goes on, we would acknowledge anyone else who joins us. Now we would like to call on certain key people to make reactions given the presentations that have been made. Mr. Hassan Nawab from the Ministry of Energy, I don't know if you'll be able to speak to some of the issues that have been reviewed today. Mr. Hassan. Shall we welcome him with a round of applause, please?
The organizers of this conference and the keynote speaker and the core speakers about this excellent opportunity that they gave to have a discussion on gas pricing policy in Ghana. I have to say that I wasn't informed that I was supposed to make any comments. However, based on the fact that quite an interesting presentation has been made by Theo and Mr. Hefner, I have a few observations on it. And the first observation is that the gas that is produced on the western side of Ghana is not all of it used up in western area. So at least half of it has to be transported to the eastern power load center of Tima, which means that there is an additional transportation cost which will either be paid to WAPCO if the reverse flow program operates, or if we build an onshore pipeline, the cost of operating that pipeline will have to be factored. Right at this point of time, the WACPA has agreed to a tariff of $2.1 per MMBTU for transporting gas from Takoradi to Tima. That I didn't see factored in the cost of the gas that has been calculated, and it needs to be taken care of, because after that incorporation we will know what the cost of gas is. The other thing that I note was that while the PURC has right now approved a cost of $7.29 for power users, the analysis was taking a figure of 8.5. I think that correction requires to be made. We don't know what the new price will be, because I understand that PURC is in the process of reviewing the delivered price of gas to power sector, and at the same time the gas utilities, both Ghana Gas and GNPC, have petitioned to PURC that the figures that the PURC had approved for 2018 do not fully reflect their costs, so that they are expecting some adjustment to those numbers so that they can cover the cost of processing, transportation, gathering, handling, all of those things. But even if we assume that PURC is, of course, going to be taking the interest of the end consumer, into consideration, and considering the fact that Ghana needs to find a way of reducing its power prices in order for the whole energy sector to become sustainable, we should say that PRC is most unlikely to approve any higher number or significantly higher number from what it has currently approved. So in that case, the margin that is left, which is indicated at $2.50, will be further squeezed. And that is something that will be required to take care of in further analysis. And finally, I think the issue about the upstream levies that the government of Ghana collects from OCTP gas. This is a very serious issue, and it does have a serious implication on the delivered price of natural gas, but it is also a matter of great importance to the government of Ghana, in the sense that government of Ghana has its own budgetary resources and allocations, and this matter has been considered, but my personal view is that there is not much scope in asking the government to reduce or review those upstream levies, because the petroleum sector itself is the major cornerstone of the budgeting process in Ghana. Therefore, having that reduction is quite unlikely. And finally, I wanted to say that Ghana is on the threshold of now importing LNG, which hasn't been factored in this analysis, but any policy analysis that is made need to at least look at gas prices for the next 5 years, if not less. And within the next 5 years, LNG is going to be appearing on the market. And LNG contracts, as they are so far, are all oil price driven. The regasification costs and all those costs, when they are associated with the gas, you don't want suddenly to increase the delivered prices of gas at that point of time. What you want to do is to take care of those potential costs that are going to arrive in 2021, 22, and provide for them now. Because otherwise, you will price yourself out of the international LNG market. So these are my few comments and submissions. And my purpose is just to open the issues so that we can have more intelligent and more meaningful discussion in these matters. And I do believe that the government of Ghana is quite seized of the fact that a working gas pricing policy is an essential piece of the puzzle, and that for this purpose, first of all, there was a gas pricing policy approved by the Energy Commission in 2012, and there was certain recommendations on gas pricing in the gas master plan. And now there is a task force constituted to review the gas pricing policy of 2012 in the light of the current developments as they stand today, with the objective of revising this gas pricing policy so that the energy sector generally and gas sector particularly remains on a financially sustainable basis. Thank you very much.
It looks as if there are a lot of expectations concerning our levies, concerning what we've slapped onto our gas price, what we're able to do within the short term and the long term, considering LNG coming on board, on stream. We have a lot of decisions to make. And I personally am very eager to hear from Ghana Gas. They would probably have a lot to tell us as well, since they are in the middle of all this as the gas aggregator. We'd like to welcome Mr. George Amwakweje from Ghana Gas to give us a 5-minute reaction. Shall we give him a round of applause, please?
Hello, good morning, and thank you, Imani, for organizing this important meeting. The pricing of gas is a very thorny issue. As you said, Ghana Gas is in the middle of the gas chain. And our price build-up is the gathering, processing, and the transportation. As Mr. Hassan said, the speaker initially have been talking about the 8.84828 per MMBTU as the delivered gas price. But the PURC changed the pricing methodology sometime about 8 months ago to the adjusted weighted cost of gas at a rate of 7.29. The key for this adjustment is that the expensive ENI gas, if it is mixed up with the cheaper associated gas from Jubilee and 10 and other sources, the price will fall. As Hassan said, the commodity price of gas is usually set at the POD level with government. So the price the customer gets is the processing, the transportation, processing, and the gathering. But let's look at Ghana Gas in the middle of the chain, what we do. Ghana Gas is a gas services company. So we deliver service around the commodity to deliver it to the customer. We have capital investment done in the assets we run, the gathering, processing, and the transportation. PURC gave us a certain rate of return we have to achieve. And also tell us about a weighted cost of capital between debt and equity, how to structure our tariffs. So there is a restriction in actually setting Ghana Gas tariffs. But as you will see, today we are putting up a pricing proposals to PURC. The big issue is that we have been told to restrict transportation of Jubilee gas because of the ENI take-or-pay liability regime. So we have been told to move about 120 million standard cubic feet of ENI gas in 2019. Therefore, we will move less and less of the cheaper Jubilee gas. So in effect, once you restrict the movement of the cheaper Jubilee gas, and you have to move more of the expensive ENI gas, the end customer is going to see higher prices of gas from 2019. Apart from this, we have infrastructure restrictions at the Takoradi metering station. Currently, we can only receive 135 million scarf of gas at Takoradi. And we are moving, we've been told to move 120 of ENI gas. So you can imagine the dynamics of the gas flows and supplies. And if you have less and less supply of gas, and you have fixed investment, it means you have to charge more of the gas services. So that is one issue which, going forward into the future, the ENI gas pricing is putting the liability regime around ENI, which you need to move ENI. If you don't move, the GMPC or the state suffers take-or-pay payment. So it's an issue which all of us should be looking at. There is also an issue of we in the gas business, you have aggregators, you have transporters, you have shippers. Today, we have two shippers on the system. GMPC is a shipper for OCTP gas, and Ghana Gas is a shipper for Jubilee gas. All of us deliver this gas to VRA, which is the dominant customer. So when all this gas is commingled and supplied to GMPC, supplied to VRA at the price of 7.29, then VRA has to juggle itself and look at the invoices which we deliver to them, look at GMPC invoices, they deliver. If we don't move more of the E&I gas, GMPC has to pay a certain fixed charge to E&I. So these are issues. So there is the need for regulatory changes or government intervention to nominate who the shipper will be to move gas across the sector. So that's one area, the multiple shipper role, multiple regulatory issues. If you look at the upstream, Ghana Gas faces a lot of regulation upstream with the Petroleum Commission upstream. And then when you come to downstream, we have MPA regulating Ghana Gas, we have PURC regulating the economic regulation, we have Energy Commission, so you have a lot of regulators. So multiple regulation. We need a shipper. A decision should be made on who is the shipper. We also need to look at the high price of E&I gas, which is coming into the mix, and the take-or-pay obligations of GMPC, which is asking us to move more of the high-price gas. So those are the issues which I want us to note. Any gas industry, you need to keep on building infrastructure. Today we are looking at, you saw the infrastructure map. We need to build a pipeline from Pristia to Nyinahini, where we have the bauxite deposits. Kumasi hasn't got a power plant. We move gas all the way, we move power all the way from Akosombo to Kumasi. There are load losses. So you need a power plant in Kumasi. All these costs and investments, you need to put it on the tariff and spread it over a longer period so that you can recover them. So in brief, these are some of the issues I want the audience to start to think of, that there is issues about regulation, issues about shipper, E&I price in the gas mix, the liability regime of Jubilee gas, which is reasonable endeavor. What I mean, it is when you don't take it, you don't pay. With the E&I, if you don't take it, you have to pay. So those are the issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. George J. Two key issues. We wish the PURC, I don't know if there's any representative from PURC here. We invited them. Any representative from PURC. We would have been very glad for a reaction there concerning what exactly is happening to the gas tariffs and the adjusted weighted cost of gas that's being changed. But in the absence of that, there's something that very interesting that stood out to me concerning VRA, that they have to juggle all these invoices from gas coming from Jubilee, from OCTP. We have the Director of Commercial Services, Mr. Isaac Doku Inamis, Dr. Sorry, and we'd like to invite him with a round of applause to also give his reactions. A round of applause, please.
Our reaction to the presentation. Yes, we are in the midst of it all. I guess we use the gas that is produced to generate the power and sell it on. I think the first thing I want to say is that looking at the general framework of the pricing model that was presented and looking at the components, we found them, they are quite acceptable. I think one area where our main concern is the regulatory levies. You look at the power or the gas coming from Nigeria is 0.6. Up to March last year, it was 0.6645 from PURC, and it's dropped to 0.4. It may not appear to be much, but where you are consuming millions of scarf of gas, this translates into quite a huge figure. And from our point, I think that is one thing that will still nationally we just have to look at, because you're talking about 0.06 and 0.4. It's about almost 6 times the price. And if you think about consuming millions of scarf if we were doing a simple analysis, if we're basing it on 120 MMBTU a day, that translates to something like $29.1 million per annum. And if you look at it on even with the 0 point, that is a 40 cents, that translates to something like $17.5 million per annum, just on the regulatory bit. If something can be done about it, I think that at the end of the day, is a consumer at the end of the chain that will tend to benefit. Another thing that was mentioned was on the composite price. We know that from March this year, PURC came up and the composite price of 7.29 for the gas that is used for generation was announced. I think we at VRE, we are caught in a mix, because here is the case, we still have a contract with NGAS, which we are barely halfway through a 20-year contract, and we paying 8.81 for the gas that we buy from Nigeria. And at the same time, we are being, our tariff is based on 7.28. So there's a cheaper gas somewhere, and we are paying more expensive, but the tariff is based on 7.29. So here's the case that there is, as at now, from March, when these new prices came into effect, there have not been any clearinghouse to say that, okay, to compensate VRE for the higher price of gas that we buy from Nigeria. It's all been absorbed. I know we've made presentations several times to to PURC, but that is still yet to be addressed. I think Prof mentioned on the one of the issue of self-generation. We had challenges as far as the power generation is concerned. We've come through that challenge where we are living in an era where there's more generation capacity than can be absorbed. But the question is that the consumer is not consuming the electricity. And why is that happening? Because the price of electricity is just high. And so people have, during all the blackouts we had, me inclusive, people have put in some self-generation, solar and all of those things. And they've done some investment. So the only way to attract the consumer back to power that comes from the grid is when the power from the grid is cheaper than self-generated. And this, I believe, that will have an accelerated effect, because the more electricity that is being consumed, the more gas that can be also consumed. So we are, I'll say, at a crossroads where electricity generation demand is not going up as high as it used to be in the past. And here we have excess gas also that needed to be consumed. And like you rightly said, my colleague from Ghana Gas rightly said, so much gas has to be shipped from ENI. Somebody will have to be displaced. We've got cheap hydro that is sitting there that can also be thrown into the mix together with the Jubilee gas to bring the prices down. But here we are saddled with the gas from ENI. And so we still cannot bring the price of electricity down. I think this is an issue that really has to be addressed. I don't know, in terms of the contract and all the things around the ENI guys, if it's possible to do something about it, because that is one of the biggest factors as far as the composite price of gas being high is concerned. So these, I'll say, are my few reactions. And the last thing to say is also that in as much as we are talking about gas, we've realized from operations, there are times that you can encounter zero gas. I mean, just before Christmas, there were issues where we had a few trips here and there from Jubilee. There was a particular time where we had a trip from both Jubilee and ENI, and so gas flow was limited. So I think in as much as we want to generate wholly from gas, we have to think about fuel security. And that is where some amount of fuel or liquid fuel comes in. VRE, I think strategically, since beginning of 2017, 2018, we've made a decision that we're going to run our plans on purely on gas. But all the same, we recognize that there have to be fuel security, so we still keep some stocks of light crude oil. Greco will tell us that, for example, for the stability of the national grid, you need at least 300 megawatts of electricity from the west. If there's zero gas flow to the west, how do we get that 300 megawatts of what? Electricity? And that is where I'll say that liquid fuel comes in. So currently, even though we are not using it, we're still keeping some stock of light crude oil, especially in the west. How should this be paid for? I mean, it's being done in the national interest to make sure that there's energy security in case there's zero gas flow. Yes, and gas have had its own issues in the past. Last year, if I'm right, I think we averaged, we had average flows about 65 MMscf a day from Nigeria gas. So yes, there have been some challenges, but I think that they have also, done their bit. And the last bit I want to say is that I think some of the data may have to be updated from the slides that we saw. Because we know that from the beginning of this year, gas, the delivered gas price to VRA, following the review of the transportation tariff period 3, the delivered gas price is now gone to 7.2. It could be in reaction to the composite gas price going down to 7.29. But competition is definitely, I'll say, helping. So it will, yes, if some of the information on the slides could be updated and I'll say shared with participants. These are the things that I want to say from a VRA perspective. Thank you.
Key among them, the one that Dr. Doku, has just mentioned, is that electricity demand is actually not increasing as much as expected. Given that we are expecting more gas supply, how are we dealing with that? There's a need for regulatory alignment. There's a need to relook at the policy where Ghana Gas is required to transport more of the gas from OCTP because of take-or-pay requirements. And we really needed PURC to answer to some gas tariff setting issues. We'll now call on Dr. Nidako Asante from the Energy Commission. He's a technical director, to also give his reactions. A round of applause, please.
Slide 17. I'll just restrict my comments to some issues to do with pricing. Essentially, what I wanted to say was that somewhere in 2012, there was a gas pricing policy that was approved by Cabinet. And one of the key things, slide 13. And one of the key things that was underpinning this was the fact that, as at that time, we're expecting Jubilee gas to come. And as has been drawn by the presentation, this was expected to be fairly cheap gas. But we all could see that the next major gas field to come on stream would be ENI, with a significantly higher cost. Now that presented a challenge. We could set a price based on the current low price of gas at that time, expected somewhere, according to this, around $5, but actually we're expecting something even lower. And then come today, when ENI comes in, would face the prospect of having to increase the gas price to reflect the gas now coming from OCTP at somewhere around 8. Now we all know what happens when tariff issues come up. Increasing prices is always a difficult thing. One comment that was made was that in Ghana, unlike the rest of Africa, we don't have regulated prices below cost. Now that was a very deliberate policy that we took, that we didn't want to create the problems we have in the power sector within the gas sector. If we put ourselves in a position where the government of the day would be faced with the prospect of increasing prices, the likelihood that there would be rather a tendency to introduce a subsidy would have been very high, because the price shock is something that no government would have wanted. So the decision was taken to adopt an import parity price. And so the price was set at the WACP level, more or less, which indirectly or directly created the rent which you are talking about. Recognizing that the power sector would be the primary source of that rent, the policy was saying that that rent accrued should be invested within the power sector. At that time, as you all know, there were many issues within the power sector which needed to be addressed. So even though the rent would be accrued, and yes, consumers would be paying more in terms of the gas price, there was also the recognition that due to the subsidies in the power sector, consumers were not actually paying the full price anyway. So by so doing, we've created the situation which we now find ourselves in, which is a great situation that all the trends for gas pricing are down. We all anticipate that gas prices will be coming down overall, in spite of the fact that we are bringing in expensive gas now. Now that's a great place to be for any government, and so already we've had a reduction from the 8.5 to 7.29. It may come down, but it will be somewhere around there. So that's just to explain how we got where we are now. It wasn't really a desire to, should I say, tax more out of the consumer or extract more money out of consumers. It was not out of a lack of recognition that we needed lower gas prices and lower power prices, but it was just facing the reality that this day would come where E&I would be completed and we would be faced with taking 180 million standard cubic feet a day of very expensive gas. And if we hadn't done the import parity price mechanism, we would have a problem today. So as has been said, we are moving to a weighted average cost now. And so essentially, whatever the number will be, it will be closer to what has been calculated as the 6 point whatever. One of the key things, and we are currently now looking at updating the gas pricing policy with these things in mind. So we had the gas pricing policy in 2012, the gas master plan updated it and looked at introducing a weighted average cost of gas, which is being adopted as part of the updated pricing policy. That should be done this year. One of the key things, I think my colleague from Ghana Gas was talking about the mechanisms. So definitely some of that has to be looked at. A weighted average cost of gas. Now, looking just at this, you can see the different prices. Depending on the volumes, that weighted average will be different. So if we do the normal thing of setting a price for 3 years and reviewing it, some sort of automatic adjustments, that could work. But what we are looking at is having a quarterly review of the weighted average price to take care of any under or over recoveries due to different volumes of gas. So obviously, in a quarter where there's a lot of Sankofa, the price will be higher than a quarter where there's a lot more Jubilee or something. And so these are some of the mechanisms that are being looked at. Another issue is, I think you mentioned about the aggregator and so on. The idea would be obviously that somebody would have to invoice the consumers at a single price, which is the weighted average price, but each of the suppliers should obviously receive their cost, not the weighted average, because for Ghana Gas, I'm sure they'll be happy to receive the weighted average price, but then VRA or whoever is taking Sankofa would have a problem. So the idea is that the intermediary, that's the aggregator, would have to administer the weighted average cost, collect that from the consumers, and pay the invoice prices based on each cost to the suppliers. So basically, that's all I wanted to add, just to give some background to why we are where we are and where we are going from here. Thank you.
Proper at this point to open the floor. If you have a question, a contribution, a comment, or you think that you have some very superior knowledge or something that you think we should know at this point, please let us know. Right after that, we'll take some 3 key comments from 3 key people, and we'll have reactions from Dr. Theo again.
There are questions. So there are a number of big elephants in the room, and we are hoping that they will be addressed along the line. So like we said in the beginning, pricing is going to be a major issue. Now, I want to ask, first question, who should regulate this? Who should? Where should this be done? I know there are all kinds of committees trying to do it, but what do we all think should be, or who or which institution should be the center where this is done? And who is doing it now? So I understand there is some kind of arrangement around that. We are looking for some kind of coherence, because then we all know where to go. Then here is the issue. the question of regulation is not a given. It is not by force that by all means somebody should sit somewhere and set the price. So in Professor's slides, he talked about where gas-to-gas competition sometimes sets the price. And if you look at that, where that is done, the price is lowest. Now, the dynamics here are not the same, but we should ask ourselves this question. Should we be tinkering with the market in this instance? Again, regulation is not a given. Should we be tinkering, or we should just allow the gas-to-gas competition to set the price? It's not an easy question to answer because, for instance, of E&I. But let me explain why we need to think about this. One, self-generation is extremely important. Anybody who can afford solar, because of how well the technologies have developed, is going there. If you read that same document, What Our Oil Cannot Do For Us, which we published in 2010, we actually predicted way before that the price of oil will fall because there's a lot of competition coming up in alternative energies. Now, that situation will continue. Today, we have a situation where, okay, let me cut the story short, but the point is this: the demand is likely to go down. So, we should be looking potentially at exporting power. We've talked about the difficulty of exporting gas. So we should be looking at exporting power. But whether we'll be successful in exporting power will be determined by the cost of that power, which is also affected by the cost of the gas, etc. So we should be looking for the option that gives us the lowest price or cost of gas. And if one of those options is almost no regulation, government not looking at it as a cash cow, we're not padding with all kinds of things, then we should look at that. I haven't had a discussion on that option. So please, in the discussions or the answers or whatever feedback comes, let's look at what you think about just leaving things be. Thank you.
But Mr. Bento, who are you asking the question to?
Hello, my name is Kwamina from West African Gas Pipeline. Just a few touch on the presentation Dr. Theo Champon and Professor Manfred shared concerning West African Gas Pipeline. And VRA can bear testimony to the fact that for about a year now, they are getting good volumes. They are getting good volumes from the Nigerian supply. So probably calling West African Gas Pipeline as unreliable is not accurate, because we have been doing very well, and unreliability is a thing of the past, first of all. And also taking that the gas price from West African gas price is about $8, looking at the ENI renegotiated price of about $7.89, we should take into the fact that the transportation tariff is, according to what you shared, is that of a postage stamp. So regardless of where you are taking the gas, it still stays the same. If today Cote d'Ivoire is taking the gas from ENI, it'll still be at the same price. However, when you look at the OCTP gas, if you are to move it from Takrady to Tema, it's going to take another transportation cost, which will increase that 8.10 to about $9 or over. So that too should take good. A few things I would want to share on this platform. The first one is for us to have that kind of synergy between global natural gas prices and our local prices. It shouldn't be too far, or it shouldn't be an outlier over the bracket we are looking at. We're looking at referencing points like the Henry Hub National Balancing Point and the Title Transfer Facility, TTF. They are all between $3, $6, $7 per MMBTU, and we are looking at our gas prices being over $7, $8, $9 per MMBTU. Moving on, I would want to encourage all of us, those here, to work closely with other comparator countries like Nigeria and those in the sub-region to make sure that we have a more liquid market in the West African sub-region, because there's a lot of gas in this market. And we have to look at that area and make sure that our gas is as liquid as possible, our market is as liquid as possible, in that way, we can also reduce the cost of gas, because the more liquid the market is, the lower the gas price. Finally, I also want to encourage the regulators that they should know how to negotiate prices. Let me put it that way, because negotiating LPG is not the same as negotiating natural gas prices. Negotiating oil prices is not the same as negotiating natural gas prices. So in that way, we need to build or increase our human capital in that respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A question. I'm going to go here then. Is Dr. Sivantia, is he here? I'm sure the questions Mr. Bentel asked, you are in a position to, if not shed light on some of the issues, react to some of those questions. But I'll take one minute and I'll go there.
I just want to respond to the question that Dr. Theo asked, and whether the question was that whether Ghana is ready for a gas-to-gas competition, or should there be regulation? That is the question. And my own perception is this, that Ghana is not ready for gas-to-gas competition at this point of time, simply because of the fact that there are a very limited number of sellers who are also not willing to take the market risk. For example, if you talk to ENI today and say, all right, are you willing to take the market risk in Ghana? And you will get the answer immediately. So the sellers are not willing to take the market risk. They in fact are banking on a long-term gas sales contract backed by the government of Ghana, backed by the World Bank, or some other security, in order to underpin their investment in the field, which is quite understandable. Similarly, if you expect the WACP party to take a market risk in Ghana, and you say to them, all right, there is no price fixed, whether are you going to supply, then they have a huge investment on their West African gas pipeline project. They need to have a steady cash flow to service that investment. In fact, today, Ghana has been trying for the last almost 12 months or more to sign a contract with WACP to transport surplus gas at Takoradi to Timor. And this contract has become such a difficult matter. This is like climbing the Mount Everest. The WACP party believes that they have an advantage, so they should extract the maximum. GNPC and other parties who are selling gas need to ensure that as gas reaches Timor, it is still affordable to VRA. It cannot pay more than a threshold. So this WACP has come in, set up a tariff, WACP has rejected that tariff. So there are huge amount of minor issues. Nobody is really willing to take the market risk. And finally, the third reason is that the energy sector of Ghana is right now plagued with a huge amount of cash flow deficits. So ECG isn't being able to recover all the electricity sales. When it recovers, the tariff set by the PRC is not sufficient according to ECG to cover all its costs. So the bulk generation tariff doesn't fully cover ECG. Then ECG has under recovery, so it cannot pay the VRA. The VRA cannot pay Ghana Gas. The Ghana Gas cannot pay GNPC. So everybody is in a circular default. And in such a situation, how is it possible for an investor, either the user of gas or seller of gas, to actually say that the prices and volumes will be determined by market forces and not through contractual obligation which are cast in some kind of a backup guarantee? So in my own assessment, Ghana isn't ready for that. I think Ghana will become ready gradually in about 10 years' time. First of all, there is an opportunity for Ghana to export electricity to the neighbors, but it can only be cashed if the price of electricity is competitive. Right now, Ivory Coast exports electricity at 10 cents per kilowatt hour. Ghana's generation cost is 13 cents. How can it export at less than 13 cents? So there are a number of still issues which are evolving, and the sector is not ready for, in my own assessment, for a pure gas-to-gas competition at this stage.
We would have to take, at this point, some reactions from the head of gas business at GMPC, Mr. Hamis Yusuf.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation and thanks for all the presentations. Let me just ask quickly whether this report has been published yet or yet. Okay. So I think what would be very useful is if we could get the report and then do some further review of it and maybe provide some updated data. I realize that some of the data that you have there are a bit outdated. And so that's the first comment. But I think the report and the presentations have been well researched, and we should thank you for that effort. Mr. Benson made the point around the price being the most important issue for the sector. And I think, luckily for us, Barbara mentioned the issue of payment. And from where I stand, or where GMPC stands, I think for the sector widely, the payment issue is even more fundamental than just the pricing. We can talk about the pricing, and I think a lot of other people have talked about it already. But just to mention that if we say that since we started selling gas, GMPC started selling gas, we haven't received any payments from the downstream, I'm sure people will be surprised. But that is a fact. So today we've built up to about $300 million of unpaid invoices. Now, unless this is resolved, we can't say we have an industry that will feed our power sector or any other for that matter. So it's very important that please we take the issue of payment very seriously. I know the scope of this work is mainly on the price, but let's not end it there. Let's do more on the payment as well, because the payment is very key. Without the payment, we don't have the sector at all. Okay, Ghana Gas mentioned the issue of multiple shipper, or even aggregator. I think that has been addressed by the ministry, and we hope very soon the ministry will come up with some guidelines on that. Let me mention also that the issue of gas infrastructure is very key. Now, we've talked a lot about infrastructure going to other parts of the country. I think what is important is to let demand drive that. Because if we don't do that, and unless we have the money to invest on our own, otherwise any project financed investor will not invest unless they see that there's demand for the gas that will go there. And certainly from where we are today, the demand is not established there. So please let's take note of that. Maybe let me just quickly mention from GMPC's perspective again the issues that are key to GMPC. One is the offtake of the gas, which today, as some of you probably know, it's not, we are able to take the full volume of the OCTP or the other gas sources. And that is because of challenges we have downstream. The power plants that should be taking the gas are not fully available. Some are there, but then again there is infrastructure challenge in terms of pipeline. So pipeline, for example, that should send the gas to Tema, where some power plants are, that pipeline doesn't exist. We have WAP that we are trying to do the reverse flow, is been faced with some challenges, and I think Hassan talked about the pricing issues, the tariffs. I wouldn't be able to go into the detail because it's still an ongoing negotiations. But what we are doing in terms of fixing the offtake challenge, yes, one is the reverse flow, but the second is to make sure that there's enough capacity at the point of usage. So whether it's in Takoradi or in Tema, we are working with various partners to bring more capacity there. So power plants are going to come up more in Tema, recently we should have, in the very near future, we should have Sen Power, for example, operating at commercial capacity. They are now doing commissioning and they should be ready soon. Then we have the car power that is currently in Tema also to move to tap ready, or secondly to be specific. And once this is done, it's supposed to basically reduce the liability or the off-take efficiency that we have currently with Sankofa. So that is the second thing that we're doing. Like I said, we have more power plants expected there, including Amandi as well to take part. Now, the other thing that I should mention, I'm mentioning the price. I mean, the price is very key. But you can look at the price from two perspectives. One is how the price, so I mentioned the payment. How the price is set affects the payments. And also whether we are even able to collect the revenues that should accrue from the gas sales. One is that we know it's not always the case that the PRC determined tariffs are able to pay for all the costs and even not to talk about margins. But I think what is important, and we have sold this to PRC, we hope they've taken that, is the fact that when it comes to the commodity price of the gas, really it's not a regulation issue. It is something that is bilateral between the buyer of the gas upstream and the seller of the gas. And this is key because if we try to regulate all the way there, we might start with investment. Investment will not come because the regulator may not give them the price that will attract investors. Yes, but what do we do after we get the commodity price, and the regulator comes in, and the regulator then will determine the tariffs that go with that. And I think that's where PRC should focus their attention. Then, of course, the issue of whether ECG is able to collect the revenues and PRS also becomes important. Thank you very much.
Very interesting. I think we're beginning to get some answers to Mr. Bentel's questions, whether or not we should allow the market to agree with you. Mr. Bentel, I hope you're getting some answers. But we'll go to Dr. Sivantia. You have listened to the conversation. What are your thoughts? We know, as far as your work is concerned, there's been a lot of engagement between yourself and all these institutions here. Not too recent, there was a series of media reports as well. What do you make of the findings of this particular work, and more importantly, the comments that are coming from the players you have within the power sector?
Well, thank you very much. I missed most of the discussions in the presentation, but I'm aware of the challenges in the sector relative to the gas subsector. And first I say that there's an urgent need to resolve the huge indebtedness in the sector. I'm aware we created the ESLA as a vehicle to deal with this, but we don't seem to have much accountability in terms of how much is accruing from the ESLA and how we are disbursing these amounts. I know we got some money from it, but we prioritized settling the financial institutions and left out our our own energy institutions. And so there's still that challenge, and it's accumulating by the day. Between GNPC and Ghana Gas, we need to also streamline the relationship. At one point, Ghana Gas was an autonomous body. At another point, as a limited liability company with its own board and all that. At another point, we decided to set it up as a subsidiary of GNPC. I think the current position is to have it as a subsidiary of GNPC, but with its own board. It is not too clear, but in terms of the transaction, GNPC is the aggregator. I heard Ghana Gas aggregator. That is not right. GNPC is the aggregator. So it collects the gas and sells to Ghana Gas based on a 30-day credit. So 30 days, Ghana Gas should pay. Ghana Gas adds value to the gas. It processes into LPG. It does condensates. It generates revenue from these activities beyond the lean gas that we sell to VRA. I think for last year, they made about some $47 million, but they paid nothing to GNPC. The argument is that they use the money to finance their operations. We agree that you need to finance your operation, but that does not prevent you from paying your debt. So we need to look at the business relationship between the two entities, and it has to be at arm's length, so that at least sound business practices are observed. I've also heard issues about regulation of the sector, the subsector. Currently, I know we are operating on a kind of a gentleman's agreement between Petroleum Commission and Energy Commission in terms of who regulates what. But we need to, and most mature countries, in terms of this kind of sector, you have a situation where you have the entire petroleum sector brought under one regulatory body. And within it, then you have the upstream, midstream, and downstream. It's not too clear in Ghana where the upstream ends and where the midstream begins. So you recall that in even laying out the infrastructure for harvesting gas in this country, there was a time when concerns were raised about the quality of the pipelines. And the Petroleum Commission instructed Ghana Gas not to bury the pipes until it had inspected the pipes. But then Energy Commission gave Ghana Gas the green light to go ahead and bury the pipes. And so Ghana Gas buried the pipe before Petroleum Commission could get there. And so we were not able to verify the claims being made by a group that I lead, the civil society platform on oil and gas. We couldn't verify the claims they made in terms of the quality of the pipes that were being laid and all that. So I think the gas sector in general is something that requires a lot of attention. And we need to actually, in terms of the institutional arrangement, there are a lot of overlaps here and there. In terms of who even negotiates gas pricing, and those of you who work in the institutions that have to do with gas pricing, you agree with me. It was negotiated without the technocrats. You were only informed after the price had been negotiated. And that is wrong. Thank you.
Summary end there. It clearly means there's a lot of questions that we need to answer. But let's go to the Energy Commission and see what they have to say.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. NDK, Dr. NDK has to really respond to yours. Mine is really on other issues. Well, I know, I mean, the ENI, like you mentioned, Nigerian one, if in fact we have been sincere, respect ourselves as country, neighbors, as ECOWAS, of course, there will not be any need for the ENI. Because look at the Nigerians sitting, the girl sitting down in Nigeria over there, but you prefer invest in that or in that about 5 billion and then export it that way to other countries, Asia, and then your own West African pipeline. I'm not talking now VRA is in debt. These are not those things. You're not supplying the gas. And you were prepared, Nigeria was prepared to pump gas from Nigeria to Europe. And then this was, we challenged African Development Bank, and then that project more or less was on hold. So that was it. Because we know we are not ECOWAS, but though you're a young man, so let's pray. Then also, secondly, ENI did very well in taking that risk, investing that deep house underground. Right? Unfortunately, if you look at the reserves, the discovery, even they make a lot of noise, but not large enough. Let's take Brazil. When it went deeper at the pre-salt level, that's I'm talking about geology, hitting over 10 TCF deposits, you see, and made the gas cheap. But oil is not like that. Now, if you have a gas, even at the weighted price, about $7.5 or dollars per million BTU, if you're going to use it to produce electricity, you're talking about average 9 cents per unit. What industry? You can't use this one to power what we call a base industry, like aluminium, those things we are talking about. You're talking about doing something about less than 5 cents per unit and all that. You see. But then I support what Dr. Doku said. If we take the risk and say reduce the price of electricity down for the industries to grow, when they create jobs, the jobs they keep our brothers and our children in there working. There's also a social price that more we are paying there. Then if the industry make profit, you see, are they prepared that if you tell the profit, say, go and pay, let's give it to the power companies to break their even. We are not prepared. We are not transparent. Excuse me, though I work with the government itself. When at time they reach electricity, people expect to come down and say, no, I wish to clear some debt. We don't trust ourselves. So these are the challenges that we have. Let me see whether there's any point there that I've left out.
I hope that there is no other point. Because
so I'll give this one to NDK to really to comment or to respond to you.
You just moderated your. That's fine. That's fine. We can take that.
Okay, I'll be quick. Just on the issue of regulation. First of all, when it comes to regulating of the gas sector, when it comes to transportation, transmission, by its nature, it's a monopoly service. We can't have everybody doing their own pipeline to take gas from the east to the west or vice versa. So once it's a monopoly, you need a regulator. You cannot have somebody doing his pipeline and charging you whatever he wants, because he will obviously charge you more than he needs. And so the aim is that a regulator would ensure that he only charges what is necessary for him to recover his investment and make a reasonable return. So when it comes to transportation and distribution, similar reason for distribution. We don't want everybody laying their pipeline to the power plants. We need just one pipeline that anybody can put gas in to get there. So again, distribution, just like power distribution, is a monopoly, and so you need regulation there. Our laws, current laws, fully recognize that. If you look at the Energy Commission Act, the only regulation is required for transportation and distribution. There's no regulation on the price of gas, as in from the field or from Nigeria or from LNG. There's no regulation on that. Similarly, there will be no regulation on if we did go to the point of having multiple sellers in a distribution network. That again will be competitive. So when we get to the point where we can have the multiple sellers, yes, then we can move away from the regulation of gas price. Now the problem again, I think Hassan has answered the thing about we don't yet have enough buyers and sellers. One of the other things I'll comment about is the identity of the regulator. You've probably heard many times people say there's overlaps and there's no clarity as to who the regulator should be. Actually, it's not accurate. The law is very clear. There's no ambiguity. We've had meetings upon meetings, and at the end of them, we always come to the conclusion that where is the overlap? There's a lot of overlap in our minds. But that is mainly because we haven't read the laws. And sometimes, yes, there is a case where maybe a company's object of incorporation was in variance somewhat with the law. But obviously, we know that a company's objects of incorporation cannot trump the law. So the law is very clear. Currently, there's the Energy Commission, that is the downstream regulator for transportation and distribution of gas, as well as for wholesale supply. Everything beyond that is outside the Energy Commission's mandate. And that is why the Petroleum Commission has its uncontested purview in the upstream sector, in the gathering, and everything to do with that is purely within the petroleum sector. However, there are some gentlemen's agreements, that is correct. Strictly speaking, ENI's production of gas should be regulated by the Energy Commission on their ship. Well, maybe the Energy Commission doesn't want to go into helicopters and do all the training required to go and regulate things on FPSOs. So there is a gentleman's agreement between Energy Commission and Petroleum Commission that we will leave the regulation of ENI to the Petroleum Commission up to the first stage compression within the ORF. And so we've stuck with that gentleman's agreement and done it on that basis. There was some discussion at one point about who should regulate the processing facility, that is Ghana Gas. However, I can also say that at a point, Energy Commission suggested that, okay, why don't you take it over? And there was no response to that. So even on that point where there was a debate, there isn't actually any conflict as to who should regulate it. The last point is that in terms of one regulator for the whole petroleum sector, I would strongly suggest that even if there are countries where they do that, it it would not be a good thing to do. Upstream issues and upstream pressures are totally different and sometimes at variance with the interest of the downstream producers or consumers. In the sense that when you are upstream, fiscal issues dominate. Oil production is something the Minister of Finance is interested in, strongly. He's not so interested in oil supply and so on. Yeah, he'll take his taxes, but it doesn't go to his budget straight. So if you allow the upstream people to control the whole chain, you'll have some very difficult decisions made. When it comes to regulating monopolies, that is not a skill for an upstream regulator. Monopoly regulation is totally different from upstream regulation of access and selling of blocks and all that sort of thing. So definitely, well, what's the decision, I think, through the gas master plan is that there will be an upstream regulator and there will be downstream regulation. The identity of that downstream regulator is still being negotiated and discussed. Thank you.
So those are very interesting comments. But Hassan, whilst we hear from you, you know, there are still gray areas around the realignment or alignment, if you like, of the institutions in the power sector regarding the regulation of the prices. I want you to box your comments around that. And then if there are representatives from ECG here, it looks like you are the third leg of the industry in terms of sale of power. And it appears to suggest, I mean, the conversations I've had now appear to suggest that if you don't get money to pay all of us along the value chain, we run into complications. So if you are from ECG and you're here, we'd like to hear from you right after Hassan.
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank Dr. Theo Champon and Professor Manfred for the lucid presentation. I recognize also my uncle Tobe Akoli, the MD of Goyle, a very good friend from Tinkujo. You know, we politicians, when we come to a program, we have to acknowledge people before we get into the groove. Kofi Bentil as well is here, my very good friend. As a matter of fact, for the records, I'm an associate of Imani. And Franklin was also my client. I saved him from going to jail. One time in 2015. Slate really meant to take you on. I feel very compelled. I really didn't want to speak, but I feel very, very compelled to make some interventions, especially with regard to institutional realignment. There's been some gaps, not in terms of the law, but in terms of operationalizing the law. So the law may be very precise about MPA doing ABCD. Energy Commission is supposed to regulate XYZ, and then PURC, Petroleum Commission. But here's the confusion. Currently, technical regulation of gas processing outside the petroleum agreement lies in the hands of the Energy Commission. Economic regulation of gas processing and transmission, including tariff setting, lies with the PURC. Bulk transportation of NGLs, LPG, pentanes, and condensate lies with Energy Commission. Retail distribution of natural gas, retail distribution of LPG, CNG, NGLs, pentanes, condensate lies with the NPA. And then economic regulation of gas processing, transmission, lean gas, NGLs lies with the PURC. So, for instance, we take the example of Ghana Gas. Ghana Gas is partly regulated by Petroleum Commission, PURC, in terms of the pricing, EC, Energy Commission, in terms of gas transportation, and then the NPA, because the NPA under our law is mandated to regulate processing of gas. We are also supposed to regulate expressly in the Act LPG.
condensate, and other petroleum products that have not been specified in the in the MPA Act. So the Ministry of Energy and other players in the industry, and Kofi rightly diagnosed the problem, there is some amount of conflict. And a cabinet memo has been sent for cabinet attention to do this kind of institutional realignment. Different options have been proposed. A series of meetings, like Dr. Ankara said, have been held, among which is the Gas Master Plan Implementation Committee, of which we are all members. And they have proposed legal, institutional realignments, reforms, technical, and all the reforms that you need to streamline the gas sector. So we have upstream and downstream, and no more midstream, for effective regulation, and for certainty and predictability. So we don't have this cross movement up and down. So I don't know. I really didn't want to speak, but I would rely on the wisdom of cabinets, because the matter is within the remit of cabinet, and then in due course we'll see what comes out of it. That will be to the benefit of the entire industry. I think a whole lot of things have been said. I do not dispute what has been said in terms of the pricing and so on and so forth. We'll still defer to them that are the experts, because we don't have much to say as far as natural gas pricing is concerned at this stage. So we'll defer to your experts' opinions. And then we have our consultant here, Hassan. Long time no see, you need to come around so we'll finalize all these things. So I thank you very much for your kind attention.
A very brilliant submission there. Still a few issues to clarify. Barbara, have you figured out anybody from ECG yet? Are you ECG?
No. But you see, on this matter, I'm back up again, because at least going out of here, we should have tinkered with or talked about or come to some sort of, maybe hopefully, a conclusion on at least one issue. And that issue is, who do we think? Okay, I asked two questions. Who is doing it now, and who should be doing it? I'm happy with Hassan's intervention that is being looked at. Now, whatever cabinet or whoever is doing, a group like this has the independence of thought and some significant knowledge to come up with some idea of who it should be. And I am hoping that there will be a few comments on that, so that at least whoever is taking the cue will take the cue. Who should it be? From a policy analysis point of view, I think it should be coherent. There should be more or less one group. There shouldn't be streams necessarily. From the top all the way to the ground, we have one, organization looking at the whole chain, and then we can deal with things in a more, coherent way. So I'm hoping for comments about who it should be, just suggestions, so that we can get a sense of direction.
Thank you, Mr. Bentil. We're still looking forward to hearing from ECG. So if any rep is here that will be willing to speak. We actually have your names, but we are restricting ourselves from mentioning the names.
We'll be forced to if they don't show up. But let me go to Dr. Mateo. You want to talk about what Mr. Bentil has just mentioned?
Exactly. Just want to say that listening to Hassan Tampori, we see where the problem is. And that is why I make the point that we need to have a petroleum sector regulatory body. Within it, a department dealing with A department dealing with B, a department dealing with C, so that we can afford some coordination. When it got to a point that our revenue agencies were not coordinating very well, what did we do? We amalgamated them into the Ghana Revenue Authority, even that they're still not coordinating. Because I had a situation where transfer pricing unit was asking me about the specification of a certain equipment imported for Ghana gas project. When in actual fact, they could have gotten that information from the customs division, and they are sitting in the same room. But at least it makes sense to make some effort towards coordinating our activities as against contesting our TEPs. Thank you.
Well, interesting submission there. I don't know those who agree.
actually. Our question is, if we're casting a vote now, who should be the regulator? The Energy Commission, the National Petroleum Authority, Petroleum Commission. Who should it be?
No, there's one more. Dr. Stephen.
PURC, sorry.
Dr.
Hold
Stephen
on.
has just added another one.
I think I just want to make just a little intervention, which is when we say regulator, we have to be a bit more specific. Are we talking a technical regulator, somebody regulating pricing, or we're talking all of it together? So we just have to be a bit more specific on, who the regulator should be.
My name is Reverson, a petroleum engineer and economist. So it has been a wonderful debate. So far, so good. Sitting back here, I've been enjoying myself. But the question as to which entity in the government should regulate the gas sector, makes me get up and say something. The gas sector 10 years back was not as popular as we see today. I'll be frank. We can ask you and I if you had given them the gas field 20 years ago, if they would have developed it. Of course not. But the gas sector for the past 10 years, like I said, has got a name and then got a lot of attention because of geopolitical issues. So what I would say is the oil and gas industry, especially the gas industry, is driven geopolitically. Other than that, Poland wouldn't buy gas from US whilst Russia is their neighbor. Talking about Nigerian gas to Ghana, comparing Nigerian gas price to Ghana price is a very big error, because now let's look at the gas fields and even the amount of gas or the reserve they have in Nigeria, like Dr. Teo rightly mentioned in his presentation. Now, also transportation costs, and now we're talking about deep water. Okay, now coming down to the question as to which entity should regulate the gas sector. I believe we have PC regulating the upstream industry, and we gladly have NPA regulating the downstream. I think we had a comment that states that it would be wrong to have one entity or one institution to regulate the whole petroleum industry, and I think that is wrong. Let's look at Norway. Norway has one body regulating both upstream to downstream. It can be done. We had PC going now to Indonesia, or no, I think Trinidad and Tobago. I was there myself. In Norway, I was there to learn from the Norwegian and the expert. So if you learn from Norway indeed, and you know that Norway has one body regulating all the petroleum industry, why don't you copy that? Now, when it comes to Russia, the same thing. Gazprom set the terms and regulates the gas sector as Rosneft regulated the oil sector. I don't see anything wrong having NPA regulating the downstream and PC regulating the upstream. In this case, fine, we don't have any mystery, but at the moment we're talking about the production, transportation, and then the utilization. One thing I'm ending up saying that we're talking about gas pricing. One thing that is very, very critical, I think it's been mentioned one or two times among ourselves, is now the cost of production. Let's take ENI as an example. ENI has its field development plan. Field development plan does not include only technical things. It includes economics. So for the food development plan to be very feasible, they should have cost implication embedded in the plan. Now, ECG or VRA and Energy Commission has in mind, I know, the price of gas at which when they will make profit. Because at the end of the day, you're thinking about the utility bills for the end users. So Prof. really said the sharing of the rent. The rent here, the revenue. So that we make sure that we are not being biased as a nation or being biased as an OIC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Riverson. We are running out of time. I'm going to take two comments, but I'll reserve one for the presenters, Dr. Manfred and Dr. Champon. So I'm going to take you, ECG though. Robert, do you want to mention a name? They've already signed in. They've asked to be excused. Chatham House.
So I believe this whole discussion is about non-payments. And quite remember in March when we requested for the tariff increment, the assumptions previously made was that Car Partnership as at that time was going to use gas. But yes. Car Partnership at that time was going to use gas, so give us a gas price. AXA was going to use gas, give us a gas price. But as at that time, they were still using light crude, which has gone higher. So there's no money to pay. I mean, tariff has gone down, collection is low, there's no money to pay. So we are just hoping for tariff increment to make some money and pay them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I must add my voice to the area speakers who commend the organizers of this show. I think it's been a very good discussion. My name is Sylvester. I work for Ghana National Gas Company. And I think in discussing the tariff for lean gas or gas, we need to do that by situating it with alternative fuel as well. In as much we think the tariffs are high, you have to look at the alternative. Assuming Ghana didn't have gas and we're going to use light crude, what will be the competitive advantage? Those are the things that we need to also pay attention to. So that you don't just take a comparative analysis that looks at, okay, Ghana's tariff is X and Nigeria's tariff is Y, and therefore ours is expensive. I think that will not be doing justice to the whole issue. We have to be looking at the equivalence, that's the alternative fuel. And if you look at today, given the gas tariff at 7.29, you'll be doing a BOE around $43, which is relatively and much more cheaper compared to using light crude, around 63. So once you do that, then you'll be better placed to be talking about whether it is too high or too low. Other than that, I think you'll be missing some aspect of our discussion. Then, okay.
So is that your proposition that we use that philosophy of pricing our gas? Is that your proposition that we use, the opportunity cost philosophy to price our gas?
Not necessarily. My philosophy is that what we are using now, which is the cost price, is effective. However, to conclude or to come to the conclusion that ours is high or low, then the comparative analysis shouldn't be against what Nigeria is doing. It should be about the alternative fuel that Ghana will be using, assuming you were to buy LCO.
Which I understand, but you see, part of what we are trying to do here is to come up with some sort of philosophy for dealing with the pricing of our gas, because going forward it's going to have an effect. Now, we can use this now, or it's good for us now, but is that the philosophy you should be using? Because what it means is that tomorrow, if oil prices go up, our gas prices will go up. So you can't do this now and then do this later. If we also want to have this approach where we change as we move along, then let's agree. But this works today, but is that what we should use going forward as our philosophy?
I think the philosophy, in terms of the philosophy, we are not using indexation. So in our case, what we should use is what we are using, and that's the cost plus. I think it's effective. And like Hassan said, if you want to move into the gas to gas, or if you want to use the indexation, given the nature of our industry now, that will be problematic. So what we are using now, which is the cost of the investment plus the margin, is more effective going forward. Like you said, maybe from the medium term, 5 years time, we think that the cost of infrastructure has been amortized, and therefore we can move into the gas to gas, then that will be appropriate. But for now, what we are doing is the cost plus, and I think that is effective. We don't need to go into indexation, we don't need to go into gas to gas. I hope that's clear. Okay. Then the last thing has to do, I think Piak mentioned, Dr. Mattel mentioned the issue of our NGOs and we not paying GMPC. Look, like you know, if you look at the working capital requirement of Ghana Gas, even the NGOs are not able to even pay for how much we need to process the gas. And therefore, if you are supposed to pay a bit of that into the petroleum holding account or to pay that to GMPC, then of course, Ghana Gas will not be able to operate as an organization. We have proposed other alternatives. Can we go the GMPC way, where there will be annual budgetary allocation to Ghana Gas? If that is how you want to go, then that's fine. Other than that, if you take the locate money from us, then we are unable to process.
I think the last two submissions have managed to dribble me. The first one being ECG, dribbled me nicely. We should increase the tariff and give you more money. Anyway, I'm sure that definitely is a conversation we're going to take from here. But for me, there's a very important point which occurred between Dr. Dako and then Hassan Tampuli. One, they are both from two different regulatory institutions. One says there's no conflict. I don't know if you paid attention to Hassan carefully. He says, well, there is conflict. And in fact, he's quoted portions of laws which appears to suggest so. I'm going to give them an opportunity to clarify so that we have clarity between the two. I'm going to start with Mr. Dako. Dr. Dako, as you say.
Well, I want to keep it short, but I think when Mr. Tampuli was speaking, he assigned some regulatory oversight on natural gas liquids and so on to the Energy Commission. We are not aware of having any such natural gas liquids. Natural gas transport, yes. That we have. I thought you said we had liquids. NGLs. Okay. So then there's no overlap there. So then there's no overlap between us. Actually, the reason why there cannot be an overlap between Energy Commission and MPA is that the Energy Commission Act originally included everything that the MPA is doing. And when the MPA was formed, it was cut out of the Energy Commission's functions. So by that very act, there cannot be any overlap because whatever we used to do that they are doing was taken out. So whatever was taken out is now MPA. So when it comes to, what do you call it? Natural gas liquids, LPG, petroleum, everything was taken out and given to MPA. So as far as I know, there has never been any issue over which there has been conflict. Let me, however, explain that when it comes to policy, Energy Commission still advises the ministry on energy policy right across, even upstream issues. So we do policy which covers everything. So yes, we have drafted an LPG policy. And in the days of this cylinder recirculation, it actually started with the Energy Commission. However, when it comes to implementation, we have no say. So we actually did pass it on to NPA. And NPA said they have no policy-making function. So it went back to the ministry. And this LPG recirculation policy has been going around since 2012. And today it is being implemented because the ministry has finally decided to give NPA, I guess, the mandate or the authority to do so. So this is just to explain that, yes, we do work together and we have meetings where we collaborate. But so the best of my knowledge, there's absolutely no overlap between ourselves and the NPA.
Well, thank you very much for that clarification. At least I'm clear in my mind. But I'll be rounding up with Dr. Theo Chapo. There's a comment that, oh, I almost lost you.
Thank you very much. I think that this shouldn't be a back and forth between myself and then my big brother from Energy Commission. But I'll give you one example of where we had a situation. When Sunan Assembly was putting up their infrastructure for no, they were doing a facility, LNG facility. Precisely. When they were doing the facility, so the vessel comes in, and then it is discharged into the cryogenic trucks, and then they move pipelines and so on and so forth into the Sunan Assembly facility. Energy Commission is responsible for transportation. So they did the license for transportation, and that's ended there. Now, so who regulates the infrastructure? All right. So we have to get in. I went there personally with our director of monitoring and inspection to go through the process of regulating this. So eventually we gave them the license to operate. Now that's an LNG facility. So it regulates up to a certain point, and then somebody takes over the regulation up to. It's the same natural gas space. So the thinking is that You don't do just transportation of natural gas. If you are doing natural gas, you do natural gas. If it is upstream, cover everything, infrastructure, transportation, and so on and so forth. Upstream. And then if you are doing downstream, you take up both economic, technical, infrastructure, and everything. That is the thinking behind the ministry's proposal to cabinet for some kind of institutional realignment. So you don't do peace and somewhere another person do another piece, when indeed you are still within the same space. But that's still midstream, mid to downstream. So the categorization, when it moves from the fields into the processing facility, then it becomes downstream. Then one agency is responsible. But otherwise, you have to go and get license from Energy Commission, get another license from NPA, go get another license possibly for Petroleum Commission and so on and so forth. That would become overbearing. That's the thinking that I believe is informing this institutional realignment. Thank you very much. I hope this is the last time that we speak.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Afro-Campoli. Dr. Jean-Paul and Dr. Manfred, over to you. You've heard them. What do you make of the comments? Propositions have been made as far as the regulatory infrastructure is concerned, whether it's on pricing or the economic dynamics of the market. How does that feed into the conversation going forward for you?
Thank you very much. I think it's been a very interesting session, I must say, particularly the contributions from across the board. And I hope one of the things we could do from this is actually capture all the contributions into some sort of report as well, which can be shared with the different participants going forward. Because I think it's not just the pricing that we've touched on, but the regulatory institutional alignment has also featured quite prominently in the discussion. So it would be good to capture those thoughts, as we go along. And it fits in very well with the issues that we discussed. I just want to make two quick points, and I'll hand over to Professor Manfred as well. On regulation, my own take based on what I've seen in other jurisdictions is there's not a one size fits all. You've got to look at your particularly country context and all of that. So you have NPA, you've got PURC, you've got EC, you name it. I think if we're working on the basis of just upstream and downstream, then I would argue that all technical regulation upstream, so basically even up to the point of where the pipelines would come onshore, that should be really a mandate or something that will be done by the Petroleum Commission. That's for technical regulation, so permitting, licensing, blah, 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 that cannot be done. And then when it moves from the onshore bit with all the pipelines going to the different demand centers, I would also argue that that technical regulation should be done by the EC. The NPA, in my thinking, should be focused more on the other side of the downstream, which is the petroleum products and those, things, are coming in. But I don't see why they cannot, collaborate on that. On the economic regulation, which is, the price itself, I think, yes, that's something that PURC has to be doing. I cannot see the economic rationale. So, for example, in the UK market, you have Ofgem, and then you have a different independent entity that sets or looks at the price, taking into account what all the other players, are doing. If you box that into one of the, already technical regulators, sometimes there's potential conflict of interest. You may even see the prices potentially going much higher, which is not good for consumer welfare. So that's what I would say on that front. On the price itself, it's quite heartwarming, I must say, to hear that the price has come down from this 8 thereabout to 7.29, 7.5, and that is good in terms of signaling a shift from this import parity pricing framework to now using, the weighted average cost of the gas. That, I think, is the right, approach. However, there's still the issues of the rents that are being, accrued. But it's even also going to be a bit more challenging in the medium to long term if, ENI gas were to displace, Jubilee and those other, gas companies. Because remember that part of the price markup or makeup in the you know, the ENI gas price component, actually there's a little bit of an indexation there to oil prices, right? And that's why, to the extent that we saw cost savings from the project, was ultimately transmitted into the lower price that, you know, we see today. So it is not fixed or cast in stone. The prices will have to be dynamic, and it has to reflect what the market composition of the gas is at that particular moment in time. But it's also good to know that there's now actually a clause that has been in a regulatory provision that says we're going to review the prices on a quarterly or on an annual basis. That means that when you are now doing the review, it can be a bit more, the changes would not be as big as waiting 2-3 years down the line before you now do a review of the prices.
Thank you, Theo. Thank you, Theo. It has been an exciting debate. Thank you to all of you. We have learned a lot also from this interaction. To pick up the question which was asked earlier on, I think at this stage, for Ghana, a price setting mechanism approach based on the weighted average cost of gas does make sense, but I think the regulator should make sure to well control the cost of state-owned mid and downstream companies. We should also try to reduce the overall governmental rent, which is quite high in an international comparison. By the way, by reducing the governmental rent, the gas price will reduce. This will allow the electricity price to reduce. If the electricity prices come down thanks to price elasticity of demand, electricity demand will increase. As a result, gas demand will increase as well. And as a consequence, the government revenues will increase again. But in the meantime, we have contributed to develop the country socioeconomically. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Where's Barbara? Was this what you were expecting? You can carry on now.
Thank you all for coming. It's been a very useful time of deliberations. I believe that we've all had a very, very broad understanding of what's going on exactly on the regulatory side of things, of what's going on the IOC side of things, and what's going on, you know, also in the civil society side of things. We have served some food beside the pool. I'm sure all of you are eager to have something to eat. Everything that has been discussed here today will be compressed into reports. The research reports will also be updated and will be available. Once again, if you'd like to reach any of us, you can use the emails that were shared earlier, Dr. Theo Champong, myself, or Patrick Stevenson, or you can reach Mr. Kujo directly himself. The floor is open for networking, for speaking to somebody that you really want to speak to. We were expecting Sunon Asogli. I don't know if the rep from Sunon Asogli is here. All right, we'll have some deliberations hereafter. So lunch is served. Thank you all for coming.